your nightly companion for peaceful rest and gentle dreams. My name is Elara, and tonight I'll be guiding you through another journey designed to help you find that perfect state of relaxation and drift naturally into sleep. As I sit here in my reading nook, wrapped in a soft blanket with a cup of chamomile tea steaming beside me, I'm reminded of the quiet magic that books have always held in my life. There's something about the weight of a book in your hands, the whisper of pages turning, the worlds that open up when we allow ourselves to be carried away by words. Tonight's journey centres around a special book, one that appears ordinary at first glance, but holds within its pages a gentle power that has soothed troubled minds for generations. We'll follow a character who discovers this book and the subtle transformation that unfolds as they explore its contents. At its heart, our story tonight is about finding harmony in the rhythm of life. How sometimes the most profound peace comes not from seeking something extraordinary, but from rediscovering the natural cadence that exists in the everyday world around us and within ourselves. So as you listen to my voice, allow yourself to begin settling in. Whether you're already in bed or preparing for sleep, give yourself permission to get comfortable. This time is yours, a gift you're giving to yourself after the busyness of the day. The journey we're about to take together is one of gentle discovery, soft realizations, and ultimately deep rest. So, let's begin to prepare ourselves for this peaceful adventure. I invite you now to take a moment to find a comfortable position. Perhaps you're lying on your back, or maybe you prefer to rest on your side. Whatever position feels most natural to your body right now is perfect. Think about how often in our daily lives we encounter rhythm without even noticing it. The steady beat of rain against a window, the pattern of our footsteps as we walk, the rise and fall of our chest as we breathe. Rhythm surrounds us, connecting us to the natural world and to each other. It's a reminder that we are part of something larger, something timeless and enduring, even when life feels chaotic or uncertain. Let's begin by bringing awareness to your body, starting with your feet. Notice any sensations there, perhaps a feeling of warmth or heaviness. As you breathe in deeply, imagine sending your breath all the way down to your toes, and as you exhale, allow any tension in your feet to soften and release, moving up to your ankles and calves now. Take another full breath in, and as you exhale, feel these muscles becoming heavier, more relaxed. With each breath, you're giving your body permission to let go a little more. Continue this journey up through your knees and thighs, allowing these larger muscles to release any effort they've been holding. Perhaps you notice a pleasant heaviness developing, a sign that your body is beginning to trust that it's safe to relax completely. Bring your attention to your hips and lower back now. These areas often carry tension from our daily activities. As you breathe in deeply, imagine your breath flowing into any tight spaces. And as you exhale slowly through your mouth, feel these areas softening, the muscles becoming warm and loose, moving up to your abdomen and chest. Be aware of how your breathing creates a gentle rhythm, rising and falling, expanding and contracting. This natural rhythm has been with you since your first breath, a faithful companion throughout your life. Allow your breathing to find its own comfortable pace. No need to control or change it. Now bring your awareness to your shoulders and neck, areas where we often hold stress without realizing it. As you inhale, allow your shoulders to rise slightly, and as you exhale, let them drop completely, melting away from your ears. eyes. Notice if you're holding any tension in your jaw, your forehead, or around your eyes. As you breathe out, allow your facial muscles to become soft and relaxed. Your jaw might gently part, your forehead smooth, your eyelids becoming heavy and peaceful. Take a moment now to scan your entire body, this remarkable vessel that carries you through life. From the top of your head to the tips of your toes, notice the sensation of being supported completely, whether by your bed, couch, or chair. There's nothing you need to do right now except rest. Now, let's take a few deeper breaths together. Breathing in through your nose, filling your lungs completely, and then exhaling slowly through your mouth. As you inhale, feel your chest and abdomen expand, and as you exhale, allow your body to sink a little deeper into the surface, supporting you. Again, breathing in deeply, drawing the air down into the bottom of your lungs, and exhaling completely, releasing any remaining tension. One more deep breath in, holding it for just a moment at the top, and then letting it go with a sigh, allowing your breath to return to its natural rhythm. As you continue to breathe naturally, I'm going to help you visualize the setting for our journey tonight. Imagine yourself approaching a small, inviting bookshop on a quiet street, the kind of secret treasure you might discover while wandering an unfamiliar neighborhood on a lazy afternoon. The shop is a weathered wooden sign, hanging above a door painted a deep blue that reminds you of twilight. Golden light spills from the windows onto the cobblestone street, creating pools of warmth against the soft grey of early evening. As you push open the door, a small bell chimes softly, announcing your arrival. The sound is gentle and welcoming, like the shop itself. The air inside is warm and carries the unmistakable scent that all book lovers recognize. Paper and ink, leather bindings, and a hint of dust that speaks of stories preserved through time. The lighting is soft and amber-toned, coming from antique reading lamps placed strategically throughout the space. It creates pockets of light and comfortable shadows, making the shop feel both spacious and cozy simultaneously. Listen to the gentle sounds that fill this space. The occasional creak of wooden floorboards, the soft turning of a page from an unseen browser in another aisle, the distant melody of classical music playing so quietly you feel it more than hear it. These subtle sounds form a peaceful backdrop, like the white noise of falling rain. The shop seems to absorb the hurried energy of the outside world, replacing it with a sense of unhurried curiosity. You can feel your shoulders dropping, your breathing becoming deeper as you adjust to the tranquil rhythm of the space. As you move further into the shop, you notice how the bookshelves create winding paths and private nooks. Some shelves reach to the ceiling, requiring a rolling ladder to access their highest treasures. Others are lower, with comfortable chairs tucked beside them, inviting you to sit and sample their offerings. The temperature is perfectly comfortable, warm enough to ease any chill from outside, but cool enough to feel fresh and alert. You remove your jacket, feeling freedom in the movement of your arms and shoulders. Running your fingers along the spines of books as you walk, you enjoy the varied textures, some smooth and modern, others textured with age and use. The sensation grounds you in the present moment, a tactile connection to centuries of human thought and imagination. The air carries subtle scents beyond the books themselves. Perhaps a cup of tea brewing somewhere in the back of the shop, a faint trace of cinnamon or vanilla, maybe even the ghost of pipe tobacco from decades past, when such things were common in places of reading and conversation. In this sanctuary of stories, time seems to operate its own perfect time, like the blooming of a flower or the changing of seasons. As you wander the aisles, there's a sense that you're not just looking for a book, but perhaps the book is looking for you too. In places like this, there's always been a whispered belief that sometimes the perfect book finds its reader precisely when needed, offering exactly the words, ideas, or escape required in that moment of life. This is a place that honours the rhythm of discovery, the browse, the pause, the moment of connection when a title or cover catches your interest, the weight of the book as you lift it from the shelf, the first paragraph that either speaks to you or doesn't. There's a gentle call and response between reader and text that has remained unchanged despite our rapidly changing world. In this moment, in this peaceful place, you are part of that timeless tradition. You're connected to every person throughout history who has ever found comfort, knowledge, or adventure within the pages of a book. There's something deeply reassuring about being part of such an enduring human experience. You can give yourself permission now to fully inhabit this space, to breathe deeply of its atmosphere, to move slowly and intentionally, to be present to whatever catches your interest without agenda or hurry. Your only obligation is to follow your curiosity and see where it leads. You are welcome here. You belong in this place of stories. Your presence adds to its character, just as it adds to yours. In a world that often moves too quickly, demanding constant attention and productivity, spaces like this remind us of the value in slowing down, in savouring, in allowing experiences to unfold at their natural pace. As you continue exploring this haven of books, trust that whatever you need to find is already here, waiting patiently for you to discover it. And now, with this peaceful setting established in your mind, we'll transition into our main story for tonight. In a bookshop, much like the one you've just imagined, worked a man named Thomas Abernathy. He was neither young nor old, tall nor short, remarkable nor forgettable. He existed in the comfortable middle of life, where one has gathered enough experiences to have stories worth telling, but still possesses enough curiosity to seek new ones. His hair had begun its retreat, leaving his forehead slightly more prominent than in his youth, and what remained had long since transformed from brown to a soft pewter grey that matched his eyes. Thomas had been the proprietor of Abernathy Books for nearly 20 years, having inherited the shop from his Aunt Eliza, who had herself run it for 30 years before him. The bookshop occupied the ground floor of a narrow 3-storey building on Marlow Street, with Thomas's modest apartment taking up the second floor, and a storage space filled with overflow inventory and forgotten treasures on the third. The shop reflected Thomas's personality, organised enough to function, but with just enough disorder to suggest that interests and passions sometimes overrule strict systems. Books were generally grouped by subject, but special collections formed their own islands throughout the space based on Thomas's current fascinations or recent acquisitions. A table near the window might feature books on bird migration one month and Russian poetry the next. Each morning, Thomas followed the same routine with the precision of a temple ritual. He woke at 6, prepared a pot of Earl Grey tea that he would sip while reading for an hour, then dressed in one of his 5 nearly identical outfits: pressed trousers, a button-down shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbow, and a waistcoat regardless of the weather. By 8 o'clock, he would descend the creaking wooden staircase that connected his apartment to the shop below, unlock the register, dust the front display, and finally unlock the door, precisely as the antique grandfather clock in the corner struck 9, Thomas took quiet pleasure in the predictability of his days. He knew most of his regular customers by name and reading preference. He ate lunch at his desk at the same time each day, a sandwich and an apple, occasionally treating himself to a pastry from the cafe next door. He found comfort in the gentle rhythm of commerce that brought new faces through his door and sent books out into the world to work their magic in the minds of readers. His was not an exciting life by conventional standards. He had never married, though he'd had a few relationships over the years. He had no children, but treated the neighbourhood kids who came to browse his small but thoughtfully curated children's section as if they were his own, remembering their preferences and setting aside books he thought might interest them. His closest companion was an elderly grey cat named Milton, who spent his days sleeping in patches of sunlight that moved across the shop floor like spotlights. Thomas's world was small but rich. He knew the weight and texture of a well-made book. He could identify dozens of binding styles and paper types. He recognised the scent of first editions from different decades and publishing houses. He had read more books than most people would in several lifetimes, building a mental library that connected ideas across centuries and continents. If you had asked him if he was happy, he might have taken a moment to consider the question, not because he was unhappy, but because happiness seemed too simple a concept for the contentment he felt. He would likely have told you that he had found his place in the world, a quiet corner where he could watch the endless parade of human experience through the stories on his shelves, while contributing in his small way to the preservation and dissemination of knowledge and imagination. On this particular Tuesday in early autumn, Thomas went about his morning as he always did. The air outside had that particular crispness that marks the change of seasons, carrying both the memory of summer warmth and the promise of winter's approach. Leaves had begun their transformation, painting the street outside in warm golds and reds that made the light entering the shop seem somehow more substantial, as if filtered through honey. Thomas had just finished arranging a display of classic horror novels in anticipation of October, when the bell above the door announced a visitor. He looked up to see a delivery woman struggling with a large wooden crate. Her uniform bore the insignia of Arlington's, an auction house specialising in estate sales and rare books that Thomas occasionally worked with. "Delivery for Abernathy Books," she announced, somewhat unnecessarily. "Ah, yes," Thomas replied, though he wasn't expecting anything. "Let me help you with that." Together they manoeuvred the crate onto the counter. Thomas signed for the delivery, tipped the woman, and watched as she departed, the bell chiming her exit. He stood examining the crate with mild confusion. Its wood was dark with age, the nails rusty, suggesting it had been in storage for quite some time. A shipping label addressed to Abernathy Books was affixed to the top, but there was no indication of the sender. Thomas retrieved a pry bar from beneath the counter, an essential tool in his line of work, and carefully began working the lid free. The wood protested, groaning as nails reluctantly surrendered their hold. When he finally lifted the lid, he found the contents protected beneath several layers of brown paper and what appeared to be old newspaper dating back at least 50 years. Gently, with the reverence that comes from handling fragile treasures over decades, Thomas peeled back the protective layers. The scent released from the crate was complex. Dust, certainly, but also leather, tobacco, and something else. Something floral size of a medium atlas. Its cover was bound in leather so dark a green it appeared almost black until the light caught it at certain angles, revealing its true colour like the depths of a forest at twilight. The binding was expertly crafted, with subtle but intricate tooling along the spine and edges, vines and leaves that seemed to have grown naturally rather than been impressed by human hands. There was no title on the cover or spine, no author's name to be found. The only marking was a small symbol embossed in gold at the centre of the front cover, a simple circle containing what might have been a stylised tree or perhaps a fountain. Thomas couldn't be certain. As he lifted the book from its nest of paper, he was struck by its perfect weight, substantial enough to feel significant in his hands, but not so heavy as to be burdensome. The leather was buttery soft under his fingers, suggesting decades of handling, yet the book showed none of the wear one would expect from regular use. No frayed corners, no cracked spine, no faded patches where hands would typically rest. With the care of someone handling a newborn, Thomas placed the book on the counter and opened the cover. The end papers were marbled in swirls of green, gold, and deep blue that seemed to shift slightly, as if rippled by an unfelt breeze. There was no publication information, no copyright page or dedication. Instead, a single line of text was centred on the first page, written in an elegant hand that somehow managed to look both ancient and freshly inscribed. The Book of Rhyme, for those who seek the cadence of peace. Thomas turned the page and found what appeared to be a poem, untitled, written in the same flowing script. The words were arranged not in the rigid structure he associated with formal poetry, but in graceful curves that seemed to dance across the page, as if the text itself were a visual representation of the rhythm it described. He began to read, speaking the words softly aloud, a habit he'd developed over years of solitude in the shop. Listen first to silence, the canvas of all sound, the space between heartbeats where peace is found. Feel the rhythm beneath the rushing hours, the patient pulse of roots beneath the flowers. Thomas paused, struck by how the words seemed to resonate in the quiet shop. He read them again, noticing how his breathing naturally slowed to match the metre of the verse. Something about the poem felt immediately familiar, like a half-remembered lullaby from childhood, or the cadence of waves that remains in your body long after you've left the shore. He turned to the next page and found another poem, this one flowing across the page in a different pattern, reminiscent of a meandering stream. Morning light filters through reluctant blinds. Dust motes dance to melodies only they can hear. The kettle bells from whisper to song, steam rising like prayers to the kitchen ceiling. In this ordinary moment, this mundane miracle, time suspends its relentless march, allowing you to simply be. Thomas read this one aloud as well, and as he did, he became acutely aware of the quality of light in his own shop, how it fell in geometric patterns through the window, how the dust he could never quite banish despite his daily efforts moved within those beams like tiny galaxies. He noticed the weight of his body on the stool where he sat, the gentle expansion and contraction of his lungs, the distant ticking of the grandfather clock, marking seconds with reassuring consistency. For a moment, brief but somehow simultaneously expansive, Thomas felt perfectly present in a way that was both new and deeply familiar. It was as if he had discovered an internal room that had always existed, but that he had somehow overlooked, business of living. The moment passed as the shop bell rang, announcing a customer. Thomas carefully closed the book and slid it beneath the counter, feeling oddly reluctant to share his discovery just yet. He greeted Mrs. Harrington, a Thursday regular, who had apparently decided to make an exception for her schedule this week, and helped her find the latest mystery novel from her favourite series. As he rang up her purchase and made small talk about the changing weather, part of his mind remained with the green book and its strange poems. There had been no indication in the crate of who had sent it or why it had come to him. Was it a mistake? A gift? Part of an estate sale he'd bid on and forgotten? The mystery of it tickled at the edges of his thoughts like a word on the tip of his tongue. Throughout the remainder of the day, whenever there was a lull between customers, Thomas would reach beneath the counter and open the book to a new page. Each poem he discovered seemed perfectly suited to the moment in which he read it. One about the particular melancholy of autumn rain as a shower began outside. Another about the comfort of old books, just as he was reshelving a collection of well-worn classics. As closing time approached and the shop emptied of its last browsers, Thomas found himself alone with Milton the cat and the mysterious book. The evening light had faded, leaving the shop in the warm glow of reading lamps. Outside, street lights flickered on one by one, and the occasional pedestrian hurried past, collar turned up against the chill that descended with the darkness. Thomas locked the front door, turning the sign to closed, and performed his end-of-day ritual, straightening displays, returning abandoned books to their proper places, counting the day's modest earnings, and recording them in a leather-bound ledger that had tracked the shop's business since his aunt's time. When these tasks were complete, instead of immediately ascending to his apartment, as was his custom, Thomas settled into his favourite armchair in the reading nook at the back of the shop. He placed the green book on his lap and, with Milton purring beside him, opened it once more. This time he didn't read in snippets, but allowed himself to be carried from page to page. What he discovered was that the book didn't contain random poems, but rather seemed to tell a story, not in the conventional sense with characters and plot, but through a progression of observations and reflections that built upon one another like movements in a symphony. The poems spoke of ordinary moments made sacred through attention, of the patterns and rhythms that underlie daily existence, of finding peace, not by escaping the world, but by sinking more deeply into it. As Thomas read, he felt something inside him gradually unwinding, like a clock being gently released from its tension. The language itself seemed to have a peculiar quality. Sometimes the words appeared to shimmer slightly on the page, as if viewed through heat rising from summer pavement. Other times they seemed to pulse with his heartbeat or synchronize with his breathing without any conscious effort on his part. He found that he didn't need to force himself to concentrate. Rather, the text held his attention naturally, the way a conversation with a dear friend might, or the view of a landscape that speaks to something essential within. As the evening deepened into night, Thomas continued reading, unaware of the hours passing. Milton had long since moved to his evening post on the windowsill, and the sounds of the city had diminished to the occasional passing car and the distant hum that never quite disappears in urban places. Thomas came to a poem that spanned several pages. Unlike the others, this one seemed to be directly addressing him. You who hold these words in trust, guardian of story hours bound in dust, keeper of worlds between thin pages, preserver of voices across the ages, look up now from where you read. See your space with newfound heed, the books that stand impatient up then, gazing around his shop with eyes that somehow felt new. The familiar space, the shelves he'd arranged and rearranged countless times, the floorboards whose every creak he knew, the collections he'd curated with such care over decades, suddenly appeared to him, not just as the backdrop to his life, but as an expression of it. He saw how the organisation of the shop reflected his own mind, orderly but with room for serendipity, comprehensive but with space for the unusual and unexpected. He recognised how the warm pools of lamplight amid comfortable shadows mirrored his own temperament, generally illuminated, but with private corners kept in reserve. In that moment of clarity, Thomas understood that he had not merely been selling books all these years. He had been creating a space where rhythm could be found, where harried minds could slow to the pace of reading, where the rush of the outside world yielded to the measured turning of pages. His shop was not just a business, but a sanctuary of cadence in a world increasingly defined by speed and noise. The realization settled over him like a comfortable blanket, warming places within that he hadn't known were cold. There was no dramatic revelation, no life-changing epiphany, only a gentle recognition of value in the life he had built, the quiet ministry he had been performing without naming it as such. Thomas closed the book, his fingers lingering on its cover. Tomorrow he would try to solve the mystery of its arrival, but tonight he would carry its wisdom upstairs with him, allow its words to accompany him into sleep, and perhaps into dreams where poetry and reality intertwine. With the book tucked carefully under his arm, Thomas turned out the lamps one by one, checked that Milton had access to his water dish, and made his way up the narrow staircase to his apartment, each step feeling somehow more deliberate, more present than the thousands of times he had climbed them before. As Thomas settled into his evening routine, setting the kettle to boil for a final cup of tea, changing into his nightclothes, turning down his bed, he found himself moving with a new awareness, the sound of water filling the kettle, the feel of well-worn cotton against his skin, the give of the mattress as he sat to remove his slippers. Each sensation registered with unusual clarity, as if he were experiencing these everyday actions for the first time. He placed the green book on his nightstand and prepared his tea, chamomile with a touch of honey, his nightly ritual for years. Steam rose from the cup in twisting columns that caught the lamplight, creating ephemeral sculptures that formed and dissolved in the quiet air of his bedroom. Thomas watched them with newfound fascination, seeing beauty in this simple phenomenon he had witnessed thousands of times before. His apartment was small but comfortable, furnished with pieces inherited from family or rescued from estate sales. A sturdy oak dresser, a reading chair with arms polished by years of contact with human skin, shelves that lined every available wall, holding the personal collection he couldn't bear to sell in the shop below. The space was neither fashionable nor cutting edge, but it suited Thomas perfectly, like a well-worn sweater that may not impress others but brings its owner consistent comfort. On this night, however, everything in his familiar surroundings seemed to offer itself up for fresh appreciation. The braided rug beneath his feet, crafted by his grandmother's hands decades ago, revealed intricate patterns he had overlooked. The collection of smooth stones gathered from various shorelines over the years caught the light in ways that emphasized their subtle colours and veining. Even the shadows cast by his reading lamp against the wall seemed to hold significance, like a secret language of shapes he was only now learning to decipher. Thomas sipped his tea and opened the green book once more, curious to see what it might reveal in these quiet evening hours. He turned to where he had left off and found a new poem waiting. The day now folds its busy hands, night draws its curtain. Soft and deep, the mind releases plans and cares, and body settles towards sleep. The heartbeat slows to match the night. Each breath extends its gentle reach. Muscles remember how to rest, as worries drift beyond your speech. Tomorrow waits beyond the dawn. Is questions patient? Is needs at bay? This moment asks for nothing more than letting go of yesterday. So settle now into this peace. Allow your weight to fully fall. The world will hold you as you rest. No need to carry it all. As Thomas read these words, he became aware of the accumulated tension of the day gradually releasing from his shoulders, his neck, his lower back. He hadn't realised he was holding so much tightness until he felt it dissolving, like salt in warm water. His breathing naturally deepened and slowed to match the cadence of the verse. Setting his now empty teacup aside, Thomas continued to read, turning pages that seemed to know exactly what he needed. Some poems spoke of the natural world, the patient turning of seasons, the wisdom of trees that bend with storms rather than resist them, the rhythmic persistence of waves against the shore. Others explored the internal landscapes of thought and emotion, how feelings rise and fall like tides when given space to move naturally, how even difficult emotions carry valuable information when approached with curiosity rather than resistance. Throughout all the poems ran a common thread: the recognition and celebration of rhythm as a fundamental principle of existence and a pathway to peace. Not the rigid tempo of a metronome, but the organic, flexible cadence that allows for both structure and spontaneity, like the beating of a healthy heart or the natural give and take of a good conversation. As the clock ticked past midnight, Thomas felt his eyelids growing heavy. The words on the page began to blur slightly, not because they were changing, but because his focus was softening, his consciousness beginning its gradual transition towards sleep. Yet even in this drowsy state, the essence of what he read continued to register, perhaps even more directly, bypassing the analytical mind to speak to deeper parts of himself. He turned to what he decided would be the final poem of the night, a gentle piece that seemed written precisely for this twilight state between waking and sleeping. Between the worlds of day and dream, there lies a gentle borderland, where thoughts dissolve like morning mist, and time flows soft as falling sand. Here in this peaceful in-between, the body heavy, mind grown light, you need not seek or strive or reach, just rest within this kind twilight. Each breath becomes a gentle swing, a hammock rocking with the air, your only task to simply be released from doing and from care. So linger in this golden space, this threshold state of deep release, and let it carry you with love into the deeper realms of peace. Thomas closed the book, his movements slow and deliberate. He placed it carefully on the nightstand and turned out the lamp. In the darkness, the sensations described in the poem seemed to intensify. The heaviness of his body against the mattress, the rhythmic flow of his breath, the curious lightness in his mind as thoughts began to untether from their usual patterns. He lay on his back, hands resting loosely at his sides, aware of the weight of the blanket creating a gentle, comforting pressure. Outside his window, he could hear the occasional sound of a car passing, the distant call of a night bird Thomas felt an unusual sense of rightness, as if he had accidentally stumbled into perfect alignment with himself and his life. The feeling wasn't ecstatic or overwhelming, but quiet and fundamental. Like recognizing a melody so familiar, it seems to have always been playing just below the threshold of awareness. His last conscious thought before sleep claimed him was a question. Who had sent him this remarkable book, and why? But even this curiosity couldn't disturb the profound peace that had settled over him, a peace that followed him down into dreams filled with gentle rhythms and quiet revelations. Thomas woke the next morning feeling unusually rested. Sunlight filtered through his curtains, casting warm patterns across his bedspread. For a moment, he lay still, savouring the peaceful transition from sleep to wakefulness, a transition that often felt jarring, but today unfolded with remarkable ease. The events of the previous evening came back to him clearly. The arrival of the mysterious crate, the discovery of the green book, the hours spent reading poems that seemed to speak directly to him. He turned to look at his nightstand, half expecting the book to have vanished like an object from a dream. But there it was, solid and real, its dark green cover catching the morning light. As he went about his morning routine, brewing tea, toasting bread, selecting the day's waistcoat, Thomas noticed a subtle difference in how he moved through these familiar activities. There was a quality of attention, a presence that transformed ordinary actions into something approaching ritual. It wasn't that he was moving more slowly, exactly, but rather more completely, inhabiting each movement with a fullness that had often been absent in the rush of habit. The warm water of his shower against his skin, the scent of bergamot rising from his tea, the play of morning light across his kitchen table. All these registered with unusual vividness, creating a tapestry of sensation that anchored him firmly in the present moment. By the time Thomas descended the stairs to open the shop, he felt both energized and centered in a way that was new to him. He moved through his opening tasks with the same care and efficiency as always, but the sense of hurry that often accompanied them, the subtle anxiety of preparing for the day's business, was noticeably absent. As 9 o'clock approached, Thomas unlocked the front door and turned the sign to open. He retrieved the green book from where he had placed it beneath the counter and set it on his desk, intending to examine it more thoroughly in the quiet moments between customers. He was particularly determined to search for any clue about its origins or how it had come to be delivered to his shop. The morning passed in its usual rhythm of browsers and buyers, questions answered and recommendations made. Thomas found himself engaging with customers with a new quality of attention, listening not just to their stated preferences, but to the subtle indications of what might truly resonate with them. Several times, he directed people to books they hadn't asked for, but that lit their faces with recognition when he described them. During a mid-morning lull, Thomas returned to the green book. He examined its binding more carefully, noting the exceptional craftsmanship. The leather was not just decorative but functional, allowing the book to lie open at any page without strain on the spine. The paper was of a type he couldn't immediately identify. Neither the acid-laden stock of mass-market books, nor the heavy cotton of fine editions, but something that combined strength and delicacy in perfect balance. He turned to the very back of the book, hoping to find a publisher's mark or some indication of its provenance. The final pages contained no such information, only more poems, though these appeared to shift into a more dreamlike quality, with imagery of stars, gentle floating and deep waters. Poems seemingly designed to accompany the reader to the threshold of sleep and beyond. Just as Thomas was about to close the book, he noticed something tucked into the very back end paper. A small envelope, the same deep green as the book's cover, with no markings. Carefully, he extracted it and opened the unsealed flap. Inside was a single card of heavy creamstock. Written in the same elegant hand as the poems was a simple message. Thomas, this book has been in my keeping for many years, waiting for its next guardian. I believe it has found the right home with you. Its wisdom unfolds differently for each reader, revealing what is most needed. There is no need to understand it all at once. Like any true companion, it will reveal itself in time. With gratitude for the sanctuary you maintain in a hurried world, Etamas turned the card over, but there was nothing more. No full name, no return address, no further explanation. He sat back on his stool, puzzled. The initial E immediately brought to mind his Aunt Eliza, who had bequeathed him the shop, but she had passed away nearly 20 years ago. Could she have arranged for this delivery somehow before her death? It seemed unlikely, yet not impossible. He returned the card to its envelope and slipped it back into the book, deciding that the mystery of its origin was perhaps less important than the gift of its presence. Whatever its source, the book had already begun to work a subtle change in him, awakening a quality of attention that enriched each moment. The shop bell rang, announcing a new customer, and Thomas set the book aside once more. The day continued its flow of transactions and conversations, questions and discoveries. Throughout it all, Thomas found himself returning to lines from the poems he had read, finding in them a kind of compass that oriented him in the present, even as he moved through the practical demands of business. By late afternoon, clouds had gathered, dimming the autumn light and bringing the promise of rain. The shop grew quieter as potential customers opted to hurry home before the weather turned. Thomas used the time to work on his accounts, a task he typically found tedious but which today seemed to take on a meditative quality as he tracked the modest ebb and flow of commerce through his careful records. As he worked, he became aware of the first soft pattering of raindrops against the shop windows. The sound began hesitantly, individual drops marking distinct points of contact, then gradually intensified into a continuous gentle percussion. Without conscious thought, Thomas found his breathing aligning with this natural rhythm, his pen moving across the page in unconscious synchronization with the rain's cadence. A line from one of the poems surfaced in his mind. Rain speaks in rhythms, ancient and new, each storm with its signature sound. Listen beyond the noise of falling water to the spaces between where peace resounds. Thomas paused in his work, pen hovering above the ledger, and simply listened. The rain had indeed developed a complex rhythm. The steady background patter against the windows overlaid with the more irregular dripping from the awning outside. The occasional gurgle of water in the downspout. The subtle change in tone as pedestrians opened and closed the door, bringing brief gusts of rain-freshened air and the sound of water striking pavement directly. What might have been merely background noise, something to be tuned out while he focused on his task, revealed itself as a rich acoustic tapestry when given his full attention. And within that attention, Thomas found an unexpected contentment, a sense of being precisely where he belonged in the universe at that moment. Listening to rain fall outside a bookshop on an autumn afternoon, with no need to be anywhere or anyone The rest of the day passed in this state of gentle awareness. Thomas helped the few customers who braved the weather, recommended books, wrapped purchases in brown paper to protect them from the rain. He performed the familiar closing ritual with unusual care, straightening, counting, recording, preparing for tomorrow. Each action felt meaningful, not because of its outcome, but because of the attention with which it was performed. That evening, after locking up the shop, Thomas didn't immediately go upstairs as was his custom. Instead, he took the green book and settled into his reading chair while the rain continued its steady rhythm outside. Milton appeared from wherever he had been napping and claimed his usual spot on Thomas's lap, kneading contentedly before curling into a tight ball of grey fur. Thomas opened the book to where he had left off the night before and discovered new poems he hadn't noticed in his previous readings. One in particular caught his attention, a piece about finding companionship. In solitude, alone is not the same as lonely, as any lifelong reader knows. Between two covers, worlds unfold, and silent companionship grows. The voice that speaks from printed page reaches across both time and space to tell you that your solitude is neither punishment nor waste. The quiet moments you have claimed from rushed demands of modern days create the space where deeper truths can reach you through the mental haze. So cherish these still hours you keep, this choice to stand apart. Observe. The world needs those who take the time to listen, witness, and preserve. Thomas felt a surge of recognition as he read, not just intellectual understanding, but something deeper, a resonance that echoed in his very cells. The poem seemed to affirm a choice he had made long ago without fully articulating it to himself. To live somewhat apart from the frantic pace of contemporary life, to create a space where slowness and attention were not just allowed, but celebrated. His decision to take over his aunt's bookshop had puzzled some of his university friends, who had seen in him the potential for a more prominent career in publishing or academia. They had interpreted his choice as a retreat, perhaps even a failure of ambition. Over time, most of these relationships had faded, replaced by the quieter connections he formed with regular customers and the handful of close friends who understood the richness of his seemingly simple life. Reading these words, now Thomas felt a quiet vindication. His life was neither spectacular nor dramatic, but it possessed a depth and integrity that he had sometimes doubted in moments of late-night questioning. The poem reminded him that standing slightly apart, creating a space of reflection in a culture increasingly defined by noise and speed, was not just a personal preference, but a form of service, a holding of something valuable that might otherwise be lost. As the evening deepened into night, Thomas continued reading, discovering poems that explored different facets of rhythm, in nature, in human relationships, in the cycles of work and rest, in the rise and fall of civilizations. Throughout all of them ran the suggestion that peace was not something to be achieved through effort, but rather recognized as already present within the natural cadence of existence. One poem particularly struck him with its gentle humour. We humans are a funny lot, so earnest in our quest for peace. We climb tall mountains, chant strange words, pay fortunes for a brief release. Meanwhile, the cat upon the sill has mastered what we seek to learn, to fully occupy each moment, neither hurrying nor yearn. The secret hides in plain sight. No ticket needed for this ride. Just notice how your breath might find you're already in peace. Thomas glanced down at Milton, now stretched luxuriously across his lap in complete abandonment to comfort and safety. There was indeed something enviable about the cat's natural ability to be fully present, neither dwelling on past mouse-hunting failures, nor anxiously anticipating future meals. Milton simply inhabited each moment with his full feline attention, whether that moment called for alertness or deep relaxation. Perhaps, Thomas thought, humans complicated matters by dividing experience into categories: meaningful or mundane, spiritual or practical, important or trivial. The book seemed to suggest that peace came not from seeking extraordinary experiences, but from bringing extraordinary attention to ordinary ones, finding the sacred within the seemingly secular rhythm of daily life. As midnight approached, Thomas gently moved Milton from his lap and prepared for bed, taking the book with him upstairs. His evening routine took on the quality of a quiet ceremony, washing his face with attention to the sensation of water against skin, noting the minty taste of toothpaste with fresh appreciation, feeling the transition from day clothes to night clothes as a meaningful passage rather than merely a practical necessity. Once in bed, lamp glowing softly beside him, Thomas opened the book to find what message it might have for his transition to sleep. The poem, he found, seemed perfectly timed, as if the book somehow knew exactly where he was in his day and what he needed. Now, as the day completes its arc and thought begins its gentle fade, allow your body's wisdom now to lead you to the restful shade. Your muscles know how to release. Your breath knows how to find its way. Your heartbeat steadies to the rhythm that's carried you since your first day. There's nothing you must do right now, no problem you must solve tonight. Just settle into gravity's arms and let it hold you safe and tight. Tomorrow waits beyond the dark, with all its chances fresh and new, but now belongs to deep renewal, the quiet work sleep does in you. Thomas felt his body responding to these words almost before his mind processed them. A heaviness settling into his limbs, his breathing naturally slowing and deepening, the subtle background tension that he typically carried even into sleep beginning to dissolve. It was as if the poem spoke not just to his conscious mind, but directly to his nervous system, inviting it to shift from the alertness of day to the restoration of night. He read a few more pages, each poem guiding him deeper into relaxation, until the words began to blur and his eyelids grew too heavy to keep open. Setting the book aside and turning out the lamp, Thomas settled into darkness that felt not empty, but rich with potential for renewal. His last conscious awareness was of his breath moving like a gentle tide, carrying him out into the ocean of sleep. Thomas's dreams that night were unusually vivid, yet peaceful. He dreamed of walking through a vast library where the books the shelves occasionally changed places of their own accord, rearranging themselves in patterns that revealed new connections between ideas. He dreamed of his Aunt Eliza, younger than he had ever known her, writing in a green book by lamplight, looking up occasionally to smile as if she knew he was watching from decades in the future. He dreamed of a quiet garden where plants grew in time with his breathing, unfurling leaves and blossoms as he inhaled, becoming still as he exhaled. Throughout all these dreams ran a sense of rhythm, a feeling that everything was unfolding exactly as it should, that there was a pattern to existence that included him as a necessary element, not a rigid, predetermined as specific images, but as a general sense of well-being, a feeling of having been deeply nourished during the night. Sunlight streamed through his bedroom window, brighter than the previous day, suggesting that the rain had washed the air clean. As he went through his morning routine, Thomas noticed that the heightened awareness he had experienced the day before remained. If anything, it had deepened, becoming less of a novelty and more of a natural state. The warmth of the shower, the taste of his breakfast, the texture of his clothing against his skin, all registered with a clarity that made even these simple experiences satisfying in a way they rarely had been before. When he opened the shop, there was a new lightness in his step, a sense of anticipation about the day ahead. Not because he expected anything unusual to happen. The day would likely unfold much like hundreds before it, but because he was approaching it with fresh perception, finding interest and even beauty in details that repetition had previously rendered invisible. The morning brought a steady stream of customers, many regulars, but also some new faces. Thomas found himself engaging with them, not just as transactions to be processed, but as fellow humans with their own stories, preferences, and needs. He listened more carefully, responded more thoughtfully, and made recommendations that seemed to connect more deeply than usual. Mrs. Peterson, a retired English teacher who came in every Wednesday for her book club selection, commented on the change. "You seem different today, Thomas," she said as he wrapped her purchase. "More present, somehow." Thomas smiled, surprising himself with a moment of unexpected candor. "I've been reading an unusual book. It's helping me notice things I've been overlooking." "The best books do that," she replied with knowing eyes. "They wake us up." By mid-afternoon, Thomas found himself drawn once again to the green book. During a quiet period with no customers in the shop, he opened it and discovered a section he hadn't seen before. Poems about human connection and the rhythms of relationship. One especially caught his attention. "We pass each other daily. Brief, intersections, surface, speak. Yet beneath these casual exchanges lie depths we rarely seek. Each person is a universe, a library of untold tales, a symphony of experiences where joy and sorrow set their sails. The cashier's practiced smile reveals just one note of their complex song. The neighbour's morning wave contains a life where you don't belong, yet in the space of true attention, when presence bridges separate shores, something magical transpires, as one heart recognises more. So practice now this subtle art of seeing beyond the role and mask. In ordinary encounters find the sacred, hiding in the task." The poem left Thomas thoughtful. How many thousands of interactions had he had across the counter of this shop? How many brief conversations about books and authors, weather and neighbourhood news? In how many of these had he truly been present, truly seen the person standing before him as a complete human being, rather than simply a customer requiring service? He made a quiet resolution to bring this quality of attention not just to his surroundings and activities, but to his interactions with others, to practice seeing the whole person rather than just the social role they occupied in relation to him. The opportunity to test this intention came sooner than he expected. The bell rang, announcing a customer, and Thomas looked up to see a man he recognised as a semi-regular, someone who came in every month or so, browsed extensively, but rarely purchased anything. In the past, Thomas had found himself slightly irritated by this pattern, viewing it as a use of the shop's resources without without the corresponding support of actual business. Today, however, he greeted the man with genuine warmth and curiosity. "Good afternoon. Looking for anything in particular today?" The man, seeming startled by the direct engagement, hesitated before responding. "Just browsing, as usual. Hope that's all right." "More than all right," Thomas replied. "The shop is here to be a home for books and for those who love them, whether they're buying today or not. I don't think I've properly introduced myself in all the time you've been coming in. I'm Thomas Abernathy." "Martin Graves," the man said, extending his hand somewhat awkwardly. "I teach literature at the community college. Your shop has been a refugee for me between classes for years." This simple exchange opened a conversation that revealed dimensions of Martin that Thomas would never have guessed. He learned that Martin was working on a book about overlooked women poets of the 19th century. That he came to the shop not just to browse, but to be surrounded by books during the gaps in his teaching schedule when his small office felt too confining. That he rarely bought books because his salary barely covered his basic needs, especially since his husband had become seriously ill 2 years ago. "I hope you don't mind," Martin said, clearly embarrassed. "I know shops aren't public libraries, but yours is the best collection of poetry in the city, and sometimes I just need to spend time with the books to remember why I chose this field in the first place." Thomas felt a rush of shame for his previous judgment, followed by a wave of genuine connection. "The shop is as much yours as anyone's," he said firmly. "Books need readers more than buyers, and I'd be interested to hear more about your research, sometime if you're willing to share." The gratitude in Martin's eyes spoke volumes. A simple shift in attention had transformed what might have been just another transaction, or lack thereof, into a moment of real human connection, the beginning of what might become a meaningful relationship. As Martin browsed the poetry section, Thomas returned to the counter, reflecting on how easily he had fallen into the trap of categorizing people based on their consumer behavior rather than seeing their full humanity. The Green Book was providing not just comfort and personal insight, but also gentle challenges to his habitual ways of moving through the world. The remainder of the day brought similar moments of deeper connection with customers, colleagues, and even strangers passing by the shop window, whom Thomas acknowledged with a wave or nod. Each interaction, however brief, took on a quality of genuineness that felt both new and somehow deeply familiar, as if he were remembering a way of being in the world that he had known as a child, but gradually forgotten in the process of becoming an adult. That evening, after closing the shop, Thomas was just preparing to go upstairs when there was a knock at the door. Looking through the glass, he saw a small, elderly woman, bundled in a purple coat despite the mild evening, her white, hair arranged in an elegant twist. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, though Thomas couldn't immediately place her. He opened the door slightly. "I'm sorry, we're closed for the evening." "I know, Thomas," the woman said, her voice warm and slightly raspy. "I didn't come to shop. I came to ask about the book. May I come in?" Puzzled but intrigued, Thomas opened the door wider to admit her. The woman moved with surprising grace for her apparent age, gliding rather than walking into the shop and looking around with the air of someone returning to a beloved place after a long absence. "You'll have to excuse the confusion," Thomas said, "but do we know each other?" The woman's laugh was delightful, a genuine sound of amusement without any edge of mockery. "Not directly, though in some ways very well. My name is Eleanor Blackwood. I was your Aunt Eliza's dearest friend for more than 40 years. The name sparked immediate recognition. "Aunt Eliza spoke of you often," and suddenly revealing the beauty she must have possessed in youth. Reports of my demise were, let's say, premature. I've been travelling extensively, only recently returned to the city, but I see the book found its way to you. Thomas felt a rush of understanding. The green book, it was from you. The note was signed only E. She nodded, making her way to the reading nook and settling into a chair as if she had sat there many times before. Yes, the Book of Rhyme has been in my keeping for quite some time, but books, like people, sometimes need new environments to continue growing. It was time for it to find a new guardian. Thomas retrieved the book from beneath the counter and joined her in the reading area. I've never seen anything quite like it. The poems seem to respond somehow to the reader, to the moment, and they've been affecting me in the strangest way. Not strange at all, Eleanor said, her eyes bright with intelligence and what might have been amusement. The book simply helps us remember what we already know, but have forgotten. That peace isn't found in extraordinary experiences, but in bringing extraordinary attention to ordinary ones. That the rhythm of life is always playing if we only take the time to listen for it. But how does it work? Thomas asked, running his fingers over the book's cover. The poems seem different each time I read them, perfectly suited to whatever I'm experiencing. Eleanor reached out and briefly touched the book, her fingers light against the green leather. Some mysteries don't require solving to be appreciated, Thomas. The book has been a companion to me through joy and grief, through certainty and confusion. Now it will be a companion to you for as long as you need it. Did you write it? Thomas asked directly. The question seemed to amuse her. I contributed to it, as did your aunt, as did others before us, and now perhaps you will too. The Book of Rhyme isn't a static object, but a living collaboration across time. Look at the final pages. Thomas opened the book to the back, where he had previously noted only blank pages. To his astonishment, on the last page was a poem in his aunt's distinctive handwriting, one he couldn't possibly have missed in his earlier examinations. Bookshop at dusk, the day's work done, dust motes dancing in fading light. Each volume holds a world within, patience waiting to come to life. The bookseller, guardian of gates, between the realms of here and there, creates the space where minds can meet across the chasms of time and care. This quiet work may seem so small against the age's noise and haste, yet in these sheltered, thoughtful hours, not one moment goes to waste. For in the rhythm of this place, where pages turn and thoughts unfold, a countercurrent gently flows against a world too fast, too cold. So tend this space with loving hands, this sanctuary of the mind. Your work creates the pause that lets the hurried world its centre find. Thomas looked up, his eyes misting slightly. This is definitely Aunt Eliza's writing, but how? The book has its own wisdom about when to reveal its contents, Eleanor said simply. There are more blank pages waiting, Thomas. In time, you may find your own verses appearing there, not through conscious composition, but through the natural overflow of lived attention. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the shop around them settling into evening creaks and sighs. Finally, Eleanor spoke again. The book came to me during a period of great loss. I had become too much in my head, too removed from the simple rhythms that sustain us. It reminded me how to live in my body again, how to notice the world around me, how to find peace, not by escaping my life, but by entering it more fully. Thomas nodded, recognizing his own recent experience in her words. It's only been a few days, but I feel more awake somehow, more connected. That's the gift of rhythm, Eleanor said, her voice taking on a quality that reminded Thomas of the poems themselves. Not to escape time, but to befriend it. Not to transcend the physical, but to inhabit it completely. Not to rise above the ordinary, but to discover the extraordinary hidden within it. She rose then, smoothing her purple coat with slender hands, adorned with several unusual rings. I should go. I just wanted to make sure the book had found you safely, and that you were open to its particular magic. Thomas stood as well, oddly reluctant to see her leave. Will I see you again? Her smile was warm, but held a hint of mystery. Perhaps the book has a way of creating connections between its guardians when they're needed, but for now, it's yours to explore. Trust that it will show you what you need when you need it. Thomas walked her to the door, 1,000 questions still forming in his mind. As she stepped out into the evening air, she turned back briefly. Your aunt would be proud of what you've done with the shop, Thomas. She always said you understood the true purpose of books, not just to convey information or provide entertainment, but to create spaces where people can remember who they really are beneath the noise and distraction of modern life. Before Thomas could respond, she had moved away into the gathering darkness, her white hair catching the streetlight briefly before she turned a corner and disappeared from view. Thomas locked the door and stood for a moment, looking out at the quiet street. The encounter left him with a strange mixture of emotions. Wonder at the book's mysterious nature, gratitude for the connection to his aunt, curiosity about Eleanor, herself, and beneath it all, a deepening sense of peace and purpose. Taking the green book, he climbed the stairs to his apartment, each step feeling like part of a larger pattern, a rhythm that extended beyond his individual life. As he prepared for bed that night, moving through his routine with newfound appreciation for each simple action, Thomas felt as if he had been initiated into a gentle mystery, not one that separated him from ordinary life, but one that revealed the extraordinary nature of the ordinary itself. The book lay open beside him as he drifted toward sleep, its pages illuminated by the bedside lamp. Just before turning out the light, Thomas noticed something that made his breath catch. On a page that he was certain had been blank earlier, a few lines had appeared in a handwriting he recognised as his own, though he had no memory of writing them. Bookshop keeper turns the key. Another day, released tonight. Within his hands, a book of rhyme. Within his heart, a growing light. Questions arise, but answers wait. No need to grasp what time will show, for in the rhythm of each breath, all that matters is to know this moment, perfect as it is, needs nothing added, nothing more. The cadence of a life well lived is knocking gently at the door. Thomas stared at the words, feeling a shiver of recognition pass through him. They expressed exactly what he had been experiencing, but hadn't yet articulated to himself. Somehow, the book had given voice to his innermost awareness, bringing to the surface wisdom that had been quietly forming beneath the level of conscious thought. With a sense of wonder and gratitude, Thomas turned out the light and settled into darkness. As sleep approached, he felt the rhythms of his body, heartbeat, breath, the subtle pulse of life itself, aligning into a harmonious whole. There were still mysteries to explore, still questions without answers, but for now, in this moment between waking and dreaming, there was only the peace of being fully present, fully alive, and of the awakening city outside his window. The occasional early car, the distant call of birds, the subtle shift in energy as the world transitioned from night to day. His body felt unusually rested, as if sleep had been more restorative than usual. There was none of the reluctance to leave the bed that often accompanied his mornings, just a gentle readiness to begin the day. The meeting with Eleanor the previous evening had left him with questions, certainly, but also with a deepened sense of connection to his aunt, to the bookshop, and to the mysterious green book that now sat on his nightstand. As Thomas moved through his morning routine, he found himself paying attention to the quality of light, changing minute by minute as the sun rose higher, casting different patterns across his apartment walls. The simple act of preparing breakfast became almost ceremonial, the sound of water filling the kettle, the gentle pop of bread in the toaster, the rich aroma of brewing tea filling the kitchen. He ate by the window, watching the street below gradually come to life. Neighbours emerging for their commutes, the first customers entering the bakery across the street, a postal worker beginning their rounds, each figure moving to the rhythm of their own day, their own life, yet all part of the larger dance of the neighbourhood. This morning, Thomas left for the shop slightly earlier than usual, drawn by a quiet eagerness to continue exploring the book of rhyme and to begin another day of bringing this new quality of attention to his work and interactions. The shop felt welcoming as he entered, as if it too were an old friend greeting him at the start of the day. Dust motes danced in the shafts of morning light cutting through the windows, and the familiar scent of books and wood polish embraced him as he moved through the space, preparing for opening. Thomas placed the green book on the counter, running his fingers over its cover before beginning his morning tasks. The routine was the same as it had been for years, checking the register, straightening displays, ensuring everything was in its proper place, but the experience of performing these actions was entirely different. With his newfound attention, even the most mundane tasks took on a satisfying quality, each containing its own complete universe of sensation and meaning. By the time he unlocked the door at 9, Thomas felt centred and present in a way that had once been rare, but was rapidly becoming his new normal. The bell chimed as he turned the sign to open, the sound resonating in the quiet shop like a meditation bell, calling him to awareness. The morning brought its usual mix of customers, regulars picking up special orders, tourists wandering in to browse, students seeking required texts for their courses. Thomas noticed how different each interaction felt when approached with full attention. Conversations became richer, recommendations more intuitive. The simple exchange of books and money transformed into meaningful human connections, however brief. Around 11, during a lull between customers, Thomas opened the bookie of rhyme, turning to where he had left off the night before. He found a section of poems about the relationship between inner and outer rhythms, how our internal states affect our perception of time and experience, and conversely, how external rhythms can influence our internal landscape. One poem particularly spoke to him. There are days when minutes stretch like hours, when the clock seems frozen in its place, and days when hours pass like minutes, time accelerating its pace. The mystery lies not in the measuring, the ticking hands, the numbered face, but in the mind that does the witnessing, its varying speeds, its shifting gaze. When fully present to each moment, time neither drags nor rushes by. It simply is a spacious present where past and future gently lie. The secret hides in your attention, where you place it, how you see. For time responds to your intention, contracts or expands with thee. So, if you find the day too fleeting, slow your breath, your gaze, your hand. And if the hours seem too lasting, seek the wonder close at hand. For we are time's true architects, designing how each moment feels. Not victims of the ticking clock, but partners in the way it reels. Thomas reflected on how differently time had felt to him over the past few days since the book had arrived. Tasks that once seemed to drag on, inventory, accounting, organising, now unfolded at a pleasant pace when approached with full attention. Conversely, pleasant moments that had often seemed too brief, a good conversation with a customer, the quiet early morning hours with his tea and book, now expanded, becoming richer and more satisfying. It wasn't that time itself had changed, but rather his relationship to it. By bringing awareness to each moment rather than habitually rushing through some while clinging to others, he had begun to experience time more as a medium to be enjoyed than an enemy to be battled or a resource to be maximised. The shop bell rang, interrupting his reflections. Thomas looked up to see Martin Graves, the literature professor he had properly met for the first time yesterday, entering with what appeared to be 2 cups of coffee. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Martin said, approaching the counter. "I brought you a coffee, black since. I wasn't sure how you take it. A small thank you for your kindness yesterday." Thomas accepted the coffee with genuine appreciation. "That's very thoughtful. Thank you. And black is perfect." Martin seemed slightly nervous but determined. "I was also wondering if you might be interested in an idea I had. The community college where I teach has been looking for spaces to hold some public literature events, readings, discussions, that sort of thing. Your shop has such a wonderful atmosphere. Would you ever consider hosting something like that?" In the past, Thomas might have hesitated, seeing such events primarily in terms of the disruption to his routine and the extra work involved. But today, with his newfound perspective, he immediately recognised the opportunity to deepen the shop's role as a sanctuary for those who loved books and ideas. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he replied warmly. "The shop should be a living space for literature, not just a place to buy it." "What kind of events were you thinking of?" Martin's face lit up with enthusiasm, and they spent the next half an hour discussing possibilities. Monthly poetry readings, book discussions focused on overlooked classics, maybe even writing workshops. By the time Martin left to teach his afternoon class, they had sketched out plans for a trial event the following month, a reading and discussion focused on the very women poets Martin was researching. As Thomas sipped the coffee Martin had brought him, he reflected on how this connection might never have developed if he hadn't shifted his perception of the non-buying browser and taken the time to see the whole person. It was another small but significant change brought about by the influence of the Book of Rhyme and its invitation to deeper attention. The remainder of the day unfolded in its own perfect rhythm. Busy periods where Thomas helped customers find just the right books, quieter moments where he returned to the green book for further insights, the familiar flow of commerce and conversation that had structured his days for decades, but which now revealed new depths when approached with heightened awareness. As closing time approached, Thomas found himself oddly reluctant to end the day, even though he knew he would open the shop again tomorrow. Each day now felt like a unique exploration, an opportunity his reading chair, Milton purring beside him, the green book open on his lap. He turned to a new section and found poems about the rhythm of the seasons, the larger cycles that contain our daily patterns. One poem spoke to the autumn that was currently unfolding outside his windows. The trees release with perfect trust what served them through the growing days. No desperate clinging to the green, no bargaining for longer stays. They feel the pull of inward movement, the natural rhythm of descent. Their letting go is not surrender, but wisdom's deep acknowledgement that there is time for outer glory and time for roots to quietly grow. There's time for vibrant reaching branches and time to rest beneath the snow. The rhythm asks not what you prefer or what you think you ought to do. It simply moves as nature guides it, a perfect dance, a coming through, the full expression of all seasons, each necessary, each complete. The loud extravagance of summer, the quiet winter's deep retreat. So, learn from autumn's gentle teaching, this masterclass in letting go. Release with grace what served its purpose. Trust spring will come, new growth will show. Thomas thought about the cycles of his own life, the periods of expansion and contraction, of outward focus and inward reflection, of activity and rest. He had sometimes fought against these natural rhythms, pushing himself to be productive when his energy was naturally waning, or forcing rest when his creative energy was at its peak. The poem invited a different approach, a recognition and honouring of these natural cycles, an alignment with them rather than a battle against them. Just as the trees didn't fight the coming of autumn, but rather participated in it with a kind of graceful surrender, perhaps he too could learn to move with rather than against the natural rhythms of his energy, creativity and focus. As Thomas prepared to close the book for the evening, he noticed something that made him pause on what he was certain had been a blank page. More text had appeared in his own handwriting. Bookseller sits as day meets night, the shop now still, its purpose paused. Yet, in this quiet after hours, something new is being caused. A shift so subtle, yet profound, a recognition taking root, that rhythm's not a distant concept, but life's essential attribute. Each breath, each step, each turning page, each conversation, task and deed, all move within the greater cadence. No need to force, no need to speed. For he who once fought time's constraints, now finds himself in time's embrace. The moment neither rushed nor wasted, but lived completely in its place. Thomas stared at the words, feeling a mixture of wonder and recognition. The poem described exactly the transformation he had been experiencing, giving language to the subtle but profound shift in his relationship with time and attention. Yet he had no memory of writing these words, no recollection of putting pen to page. He thought of what Eleanor had said about the book, that it was not a static object, but a living collaboration across time, that previous guardians had contributed to it, and that he might too. Could this be what she meant? Not conscious composition, but some deeper awareness finding expression through him. The mystery of it was both unsettling and thrilling. Thomas closed the book gently, deciding that some questions weren't meant to be answered immediately, but rather lived into gradually, their meaning revealing itself through experience rather than analysis. Taking the book with him, he climbed the stairs to his apartment, each step feeling like part of a conversation between his body and the building, a dialogue conducted through pressure and response, movement and support. In his evening routine, preparing a light dinner, washing up, changing into comfortable clothes, he found a satisfaction that transformed these simple tasks from mere necessities into meaningful rituals. Later, as he prepared for bed, Thomas opened the Book of Rhyme once more, curious to see what guidance it might offer for the transition to sleep. The poem he found seemed to be speaking directly to him in this moment. Now, as the day completes its circle and waking mind prepares for dreams, allow yourself to fully soften. Release all plans, all thoughts, all schemes. Your body knows the way to slumber, has practiced this since your first breath. This rhythm of release and renewal, this little practice run for death. Don't fear that final word, that concept, for death is merely rhythm's turn, the exhalation of existence, a truth all mortal beings learn. But that's for some far distant evening. Tonight asks only that you rest, surrendering to sleep's soft current, all effort paused, all striving blessed. So feel your weight against the mattress, your muscles easing their hold, your breath extending, growing slower, your consciousness beginning to fold into the mystery of dreaming that nightly journey all must take. Trust that the rhythm will continue, and morning light will bid you wake. The poem's gentle acknowledgement of death, not as something to be feared, but as part of life's natural rhythm, struck Thomas as both profound and comforting. In a culture that often treated death as the ultimate enemy to be battled and postponed at all costs, there was something deeply peaceful about recognizing it instead as simply another turn in the continuous dance of existence. As he turned out the light and settled beneath the covers, Thomas felt an unusual sense of trust, not just in sleep, but in the larger rhythms that carried him through days and seasons, through joy and sorrow, and would eventually carry him through the final transition as well. It wasn't fatalism or resignation, but rather a deep acceptance that allowed him to fully inhabit each moment without either clinging or resistance. His breathing slowed, his body grew heavy against the mattress, and his thoughts began to drift. Just before sleep claimed him, Thomas had a fleeting vision of all the people who had held the Book of Rhyme before him. His Aunt Eliza, Eleanor, and others unknown to him, stretching back through time, each finding in its pages exactly what they needed, each adding their own wisdom through lived experience. He felt connected to them across time and space, part of a lineage of seekers who had discovered that peace wasn't found in extraordinary experiences or esoteric practices, but in the simple, profound act of bringing full attention to ordinary life, recognizing and honoring the rhythms that had always been playing beneath the surface of awareness. With this sense of connection and belonging, Thomas drifted into dreams filled with gentle rhythms, waves breaking on distant shores, heart cells pulsing in perfect coordination, galaxies spiraling through vast expanses of space. Throughout all these dreams ran a thread of recognition that these weren't separate phenomena, but expressions of the same fundamental principle that animated all existence, including his own brief but precious life. And as he slept, somewhere in the depths of the green book that rested on his nightstand, new words were forming, waiting to be discovered. The conversation its tide. Thoughts came and went like clouds drifting across a vast sky, none demanding attention or action. This threshold moment expanded, offering a unique kind of rest. Neither the complete unconsciousness of deep sleep, nor the full alertness of waking, but a tranquil middle ground where awareness existed without effort or direction. Thomas lingered in this state, intuitively understanding its value, allowing himself to simply experience the quiet miracle of being. Gradually, as sunlight strengthened beyond his curtains, consciousness returned more fully. Yet instead of the usual sudden transition, the abrupt shifting of gears from sleep to productivity, Thomas experienced a gentle unfolding, each moment opening naturally into the next, without hurry or strain. He became aware of the specific weight of the blanket against his body, the texture of sheets against his skin, the particular quality of morning light in his bedroom. These ordinary sensations, typically overlooked in the rush towards the day's activities, revealed themselves as worthy of attention, each containing its own complete world of experience. As Thomas finally opened his eyes, he noticed the green book on his nightstand. It seemed to have a subtle glow in the morning light, though he knew this was simply the interaction of sunlight with the rich colour of its leather binding. Still, there was something almost alive about its presence, as if it were not merely an object, but a companion on his journey. The morning routine that followed held the same outward shape as thousands before it, but differed profoundly in its inner experience. Each action, the first stretch of awakening muscles, feet meeting the cool floor, water running over hands and face, registered with unusual clarity, transforming habit into revelation. By the time Thomas descended the stairs to the bookshop, he felt both energized and deeply settled, ready to meet the day, not as a series of tasks to be completed, but as an unfolding opportunity for presence and connection. The shop welcomed him with its familiar morning scent, paper and dust, leather and wood polish. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, creating pools of gold on the wooden floor. Thomas moved through his opening routine with the green book tucked under his arm, unwilling to be separated from it even temporarily. Once the shop was prepared, the register checked, the displays straightened, he settled on his stool behind the counter and opened the Book of Rhyme. Today, he found a section about transitions, the spaces between activities, states, and phases of life that often pass unnoticed, but which contain their own wisdom and opportunity. One poem particularly caught his attention. Between the ending and beginning, the exhale and the inhale start, between the question and the answer, lies wisdom for the quiet heart. We rush to fill these sacred pauses, uncomfortable with in-between. Yet in these seeming empty spaces, the deepest truths can be seen. The moment after task completion, before the next demand appears, the silence following conversation, the stillness when the mind clears. These thresholds are not meant for rushing, but for noticing what is, for sensing subtle shifts of being, brief windows to what truly lives beneath the surface of our doing, beyond the reach of plans and goals. These gaps in our continuous movement allow us glimpses of the whole. So practice now this gentle waiting, this honouring of time between, for life unfolds in these transitions as much as in what can be seen. Thomas reflected on how often he had hurried through transitions in his life, moving immediately from one task to the next without pausing, rushing from his apartment to the shop each morning without noticing the journey, ending each day already mentally the day. The moments between customers, the pause after completing a task before beginning another, the threshold between the shop's closing and his evening activities. Perhaps these spaces, typically overlooked, might offer their own particular gifts when approached with attention. The bell above the door announced the day's first customer, and Thomas closed the book, setting it beneath the counter within easy reach. Mrs. Chen entered, a regular who came each week to find books for her grandchildren. Today, Thomas noticed details about her that had previously escaped his attention. The careful way she arranged her scarf, the slight hesitation in her step, suggesting perhaps arthritis or a recent injury, the particular brightness that came to her eyes when speaking of her grandchildren. Their interaction, outwardly similar to dozens before, felt qualitatively different, richer, more genuine, characterized by a mutual recognition that went beyond the transactional relationship of bookseller and customer. When Mrs. Chen left with her purchases, both she and Thomas seemed subtly nourished by the exchange. The day continued in this vein, ordinary in its external events, but extraordinary in its felt quality. Thomas helped customers, ordered new inventory, arranged displays, all the usual activities that had structured his days for years. Yet each was transformed by the attention he brought to it, revealing dimensions of meaning and satisfaction previously hidden beneath the veil of habit. During a midday lull, Thomas returned to the Book of Rhyme. Opening it to a new section, he found poems about the relationship between intention and attention, how what we seek often remains invisible until we learn to see with new eyes. The poem that drew him in spoke of finding the extraordinary within the ordinary. Seek not grand visions, distant peaks, dramatic signs, or burning bushes. The sacred rarely shouts its presence, preferring whispers, hints, and hushes. It hides, in plain sight all around you. The perfect spiral of a shell, the silent speech of falling snowflakes, stories that autumn leaves can tell. It lives between the written lines, in spaces where the ink's not spread. It dwells within the pregnant, pauses in what's implied but left unsaid. The miracle is not that water once turned to wine at some feast. The miracle is water itself, its perfect form, from great to least. The wonder isn't distant heavens, or life beyond this mortal coil. The wonder is your hand before you, this breath, this sky, this living soil. So train your eyes to see what's present, your ears to hear the subtle song. The extraordinary height in plainness has been there, waiting all along. These words resonated deeply with Thomas's recent experiences. Over the past few days, he had discovered exactly this truth, that when approached with full attention, the most ordinary aspects of daily life revealed themselves as miracles hiding in plain sight. The simple act of turning a page, the play of light across the shop floor, the exchange of words with another human being, each contained universes of experience, typically overlooked in the rush toward novelty or accomplishment. The bell rang again, announcing new customers, and Thomas returned to his work with renewed appreciation for its ordinary magic. Throughout the afternoon, he found himself noticing the transitions between activities, just as the earlier poem had suggested. The brief space after completing a sales transaction before beginning the next interaction. The moment of silence after shelving a stack of books. The threshold between decision and action when considering a new display arrangement. In these pauses, these in-between spaces, Thomas discovered a particular quality of presence, a awareness free from the pull ultimately transcended words. While rearranging a shelf of contemporary poets, Thomas discovered a slim volume he didn't recognise, bound in faded blue cloth. Opening it, he found it was a collection by a poet he'd never heard of, published by a small press that had closed decades ago. The poems inside spoke with remarkable clarity about finding meaning in ordinary life, about the sacred nature of attention, about the rhythms that underlie human experience. With a sense of wonder, Thomas realised that the universe had been offering him glimpses of the wisdom contained in the Book of Rhyme long before its arrival. Through other books, through experiences, through quiet moments of insight, the Green Book hadn't introduced something entirely new, but had rather helped him recognise and integrate understanding that had been gradually accumulating throughout his life. This realisation brought with it a profound sense of continuity and belonging. The journey he was on hadn't begun with the book's arrival, but had been unfolding throughout his life. Perhaps even before it, the book was not so much a new path as a more detailed map of territory he had already been exploring, sometimes without fully recognising it. As closing time approached, Thomas felt none of the subtle relief that had sometimes accompanied the end of the workday in the past. Instead, there was a sense of gentle completion, of one movement in the day's symphony coming to its natural conclusion before the next began. After turning the sign to closed and completing his end-of-day tasks, counting the register, straightening displays, noting items to reorder, Thomas did something he rarely had before. Instead of immediately heading upstairs to his apartment, he took the Green Book and settled into his reading chair, allowing himself to simply sit with the accumulated experiences of the day, to let them settle like sediment in still water. The shop around him seemed to settle as well, the building creaking gently as it cooled in the evening air, dust motes gradually stilling in the fading light, the energy of the day's activities slowly dissipating into a peaceful quiet. Milton appeared from wherever he had been napping and claimed his usual spot on Thomas's lap, his purring a perfect accompaniment to the evening hush. As twilight deepened outside the windows, Thomas opened the Book of Rhyme once more. The poem he found seemed to speak directly to this moment of transition between day and evening. Now, as the light begins its fading and shadows lengthen on the floor, pause to notice this day's passage, all it brought, all it bore. Neither cling to what's completed, nor rush ahead to evening's tasks. Simply rest in this threshold moment, this dusk time all its own that asks for nothing but your quiet presence, your willingness to simply be a witness to the day's conclusion, its gentle close, its legacy. For in these boundary times at twilight, when neither day nor night holds sway, the veil between worlds grows thinner, and wisdom finds an easier way to reach those quiet enough to listen, patient enough to simply wait as one phase naturally completes itself and the next begins to incubate. So, honour now this sacred juncture, this pause between the light and dark, for in acknowledging transitions, you find life's true benchmark. Thomas felt the truth of these words in his body, a natural slowing, a softening of attention different from the sharp focus of daytime activities, but equally valuable. There was a rightness to this twilight pause, this honouring of the transition from the active energy of day to the receptive quality of evening. He sat quietly for some time, neither fully engaged in thought nor drifting towards sleep, but in a middle state of receptive awareness. The shop gradually dimmed as daylight faded completely, leaving only the warm glow of his reading lamp, creating a pool of light in the gathering darkness. In this gentle illumination, Thomas noticed something remarkable happening on the open pages of the Book of Rhyme. Words were appearing, not suddenly but gradually, like condensation forming on glass, in his own handwriting. Bookseller sits as darkness gathers, day's commerce done, night's rest not yet begun. In this between time wisdom whispers, true wealth is measured not in what is won, or lost in worldly terms of gain and tally, but in moments fully lived and deeply known, each breath attended, each encounter honoured, each ordinary miracle fully shown. The shop around him holds its stories, both those in books and those in wood and stone, the lives that briefly intersect within these walls, the quiet ministry of pages shown to seeking hands, to hungry minds, to hearts that sense there must be more than rushing days and restless nights, than having much but feeling poor. He guards this space of pause and wonder, this sanctuary in a spinning world, not knowing fully what it means or matters, but trusting in the rhythm as it's unfurled. Thomas watched in wonder as the words formed on the page, expressing thoughts and feelings he recognised as his own, but had never consciously articulated. It was as if some deeper part of him was finding voice through the book, bringing to conscious awareness understandings that had been developing beneath the surface of his mind. The experience was both strange and deeply natural, unsettling in its mystery, yet somehow right, as if he were witnessing a process that had always been available, but that modern life rarely allowed space for. Perhaps, he thought, this was how inspiration had come to poets and prophets throughout history, not as fully formed messages from beyond, but as the surfacing of deeper wisdom already present within, requiring only the right conditions to emerge. When the words stopped appearing, Thomas gently closed the book, feeling that he had been part of something sacred, not in a grandiose sense, but in the simple, profound way that all genuine connection with deeper truth is sacred. Rising from his chair, careful not to disturb Milton, who had fallen asleep, Thomas made his way upstairs to his apartment. The evening unfolded with the same quality of presence that had characterised the day. Dinner prepared and eaten with, attention to tastes and textures, a brief letter written to an old friend with awareness of the connection being maintained across distance. Preparations for sleep approached not as mere necessity, but as a meaningful transition. As he settled into bed, lamp glowing softly beside him, Thomas opened the Book of Rhyme once more. Tonight, he found a section about dreams and their relationship to waking life, how the boundary between the two was more permeable than typically acknowledged, how wisdom could pass back and forth across this threshold when approached with attention. The poem that caught his attention spoke of sleep, not as an unconscious state, but as a different mode of consciousness with its own particular gifts. As you prepare to cross the border between waking and dreaming lands, remember you're not leaving, knowing but exchanging eyes for hands. For dreams speak not in words and concepts, but in image, symbol, scene. They communicate through feeling, through what's sensed but cannot be seen, in daylight's more restrictive vision, where logic rules and reason reigns. Dreams bypass these limiting structures, speak directly to what remains when all our careful constructions of thought and speech are laid aside. They whisper to our deeper knowing, where ancient wisdom still abides. So, as you journey towards slumber, set whence you came, before words shaped your understanding, before thought claimed the central throne. Dreams reconnect us to this wisdom, this language flesh and bone have known since first our ancestors gazed skyward, since first we gathered around flame. The boundary between sleep and waking is not as fixed as we might claim. Thomas found himself intrigued by this perspective on dreams, not as random neural firings or the brain's processing of daily debris, but as a different mode of knowing, a way of accessing wisdom that the waking mind, with its emphasis on logic and linearity, might miss. He had never paid particular attention to his dreams before, often forgetting them entirely upon waking or dismissing them as meaningless. The poem suggested a different approach, an invitation to maintain a thread of awareness across the threshold of sleep, to bring a quality of receptive attention to the dream state, just as he had been bringing to his waking hours. It wasn't about controlling dreams, but rather about approaching them with interest and openness, recognizing their potential value as another source of insight. With this intention gently held, Thomas turned out the light and settled into darkness. As his body grew heavy against the mattress and his breathing slowed, he maintained a subtle awareness rather than immediately surrendering to unconsciousness. He noticed the gradual unbinding of logical thought, the drift toward image and sensation, the softening of the boundary between what was out there and what was in here. The transition into sleep became not a shutting down, but an opening up, a widening of perception beyond the limits of waking consciousness. As Thomas floated in this expanded awareness, neither fully awake nor yet dreaming, he sensed the rhythm of his life connecting to larger rhythms, the turning of the earth, the ancient cycle of day and night that had shaped all life, the very pulse of existence itself. With this sense of profound connection, Thomas slipped into dreams that seemed to continue the conversation begun in waking hours. Dreams of books whose words rearrange themselves to reveal new meanings, of conversations with his Aunt Eliza and with Eleanor, of walking through forests where trees whispered wisdom in a language he somehow understood without words. Throughout these dreams ran the thread of rhythm, heartbeat and breath, tide and season, the archetypal patterns that underlie all existence, and woven through it all, a growing recognition that the peace he had been experiencing wasn't something to be achieved through effort, but rather his natural state when unnecessary doing fell away, revealing the simple miracle of being. As dawn approached, Thomas's dreams gradually shifted toward waking, but without the sharp break that often characterized this transition. Instead, there was a gentle regathering of ordinary consciousness, a gradual return to the particular form of awareness needed for daily life. Yet something essential remained, a sense of continuity between dreaming and waking, a recognition that both were valuable states of being, each with its own gifts and purposes. When Thomas finally opened his eyes to the new day, he carried with him not just fragments of dreams, but a deeper understanding that had been forming across states of consciousness. The boundary between sleep and wakefulness, like all thresholds, was not a barrier, but a meeting place, a creative edge where different modes of knowing could inform and enrich each other. Rising from bed with this awareness, Thomas felt a new integration taking shape within him, a harmony between parts of himself that had often seemed separate or even at odds. The practical bookseller and the intuitive dreamer, the careful businessman aspects of a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. As he prepared for another day at Abernathy Books, Thomas knew that something fundamental has shifted in his experience of life. The Green Book was catalysing a transformation that had been quietly preparing for years, a return to a more natural way of being that recognised and honoured the rhythms within and around him, finding in them the peace that had always been present beneath the surface of awareness. With the book of rhyme tucked under his arm, Thomas descended the stairs to the shop, ready to continue this unfolding discovery of the extraordinary within the ordinary, the sacred within the seemingly mundane, the rhythm that connected all things, including his own precious life. As the days passed, Thomas settled into a new relationship with time and attention. The initial novelty of his heightened awareness gave way to something deeper and more sustainable, not an exceptional state that required effort to maintain, but a natural way of being that felt increasingly like coming home to himself. The book of rhyme remained his daily companion, offering new insights as he turned its pages each morning and evening. Sometimes he would open it to find poems addressing exactly the questions or situations he was facing that day. Other times, the book seemed to challenge him gently, pointing toward aspects of experience he had been overlooking or resisting. Throughout it all, Thomas noticed the continuation of the mysterious phenomenon he had first witnessed that twilight in the shop. Occasionally, new words would appear on previously blank pages, written in his own hand, though he had no conscious memory of writing them. These passages seemed to articulate understandings that were forming within him at levels deeper than ordinary thought, bringing to the surface wisdom that was somehow both his and not his alone. The effects of this deepening relationship with rhythm and attention rippled outward into all aspects of Thomas's life. The bookshop itself seemed to respond to the shift in its proprietor, developing an atmosphere that customers increasingly commented on. A sense of peace and welcome that invited people to linger, to browse at their own pace, to discover books that spoke to their particular needs. Business improved, though that had never been Thomas's primary aim. Word spread about the special quality of Abernathy Books, attracting new customers who often became regulars. The poetry section that Thomas had revitalised became unexpectedly popular, with people seeking the kind of wisdom and beauty that couldn't be found in more utilitarian or entertainment-focused texts. The literature events that Thomas had begun hosting with Martin Grave's help became monthly gatherings that grew beyond their original scope. What started as academic discussions evolved into community conversations about the role of story and poetry in making sense of modern life, in reconnecting with deeper rhythms, in finding meaning amid the noise and pace of contemporary existence. Thomas found himself becoming more directly engaged with his community in other ways as well. He started a small lending library within the shop for those who couldn't afford to purchase books. He created a reading program with the local elementary school, volunteering once a week to share stories with children. He opened the shop for evening gatherings of a neighbourhood group exploring meditation and mindfulness. None of these initiatives felt like additional burdens or obligations. Rather, they emerged organically from Thomas's growing sense of connection and purpose, each feeling like a natural extension of the bookshop's deeper mission, to create a space where people could remember what truly mattered, could reconnect with the rhythms of attention and presence that that modern life so often disrupted. Thomas's personal relationships evolved as well. His friendship with Martin deepened into a genuine partnership based on shared values and vision. Eleanor became a regular visitor to the shop, sometimes joining Thomas after closing to share tea and conversation about the mysteries of the Book of Rhyme and its ongoing influence. New connections formed with customers and community members who responded to the quality of presence Thomas now brought to each interaction. Even Thomas's relationship with Milton the cat shifted subtly, becoming characterized by a mutual recognition and respect that transcended the conventional understanding of human-animal companionship. Thomas found himself learning from Milton's natural embodiment of presence, the cat's complete absorption in each moment, whether grooming, hunting, or simply resting in a patch of sunlight. One evening, about 3 months after the arrival of the Green Book, Thomas sat in his reading chair after closing, Milton purring beside him, the Book of Rhyme open on his lap. Outside, the first snow of winter was falling, transforming the street into a quiet wonderland, muffling the usual urban sounds and creating a special kind of silence. As Thomas turned the pages, he came upon a section he hadn't noticed before. Poems about completion and new beginnings, about the cyclical nature of growth and learning. One poem in particular caught his attention. The circle now begins its closing. Those circles never truly end. They simply turn to new beginnings. As one phase completes, another starts to bend into existence, carrying forward all that's been gathered, learned and known. The wisdom doesn't disappear with endings, but fills the soil where new growth will be sown. You've walked this path with faithful attention, discovered treasures hidden in plain sight. The ordinary world has revealed its magic. The common day is extraordinary light. The lessons will continue unfolding, though perhaps in different forms and ways. The rhythm once recognized stays with you, a compass through your remaining days. So trust the wisdom now embodied. No need to grasp or hold too tight. The peace you found isn't fragile or fleeting, but your natural state when you release the fight against the flow that's always carried you, the current that knows its perfect way. You're learning now to swim within it consciously, to feel its support, to trust, to stay present to each moment as it offers itself, each breath, each step, each quiet hour. The extraordinary hides in the commonplace, the infinite dwells within the flower. As Thomas read these words, he felt a curious mixture of completion and opening, a sense that one phase of his journey with the Book of Rhyme was coming to its natural conclusion, even as new possibilities were emerging. There was no sadness in this recognition, only a quiet appreciation for the perfect timing that characterized all natural rhythms. He continued turning pages, and to his surprise, found that the remaining pages of the book were blank, not just free of printed text, but empty of the handwritten passages that had been appearing. Yet this absence didn't feel like a loss or an ending, but rather like an invitation, a space of possibility waiting to be filled through lived experience rather than words. As this realization settled within him, Thomas became aware of a presence in the shop. Looking up, he saw Eleanor standing by the poetry section, though he hadn't heard the bell announce her entry. She was dressed in her purple coat, her white hair catching the lamplight, her eyes bright with intelligence and what might have been amusement. "You've reached the empty pages," she said. Not a question, but a statement. Thomas nodded. Does that mean the book has nothing more to teach me? Eleanor's laugh was warm and genuine. Quite the opposite, dear Thomas. It means you're ready to continue the learning without the scaffold of words. The book has helped you remember what you always knew at some level, that peace isn't found in extraordinary experiences, but in bringing extraordinary attention to ordinary life. Now you'll continue discovering this truth through living it rather than reading about it. She moved toward him, her steps light despite her age. The book's purpose was never to be a permanent guide, but rather a temporary reminder, a way of awakening recognition that remains even when the words fall away. Will it begin filling with words again at some point? Thomas asked. Perhaps, Eleanor said, settling into the chair opposite his. Or perhaps its next guardian will need different words. The book adapts to what is most needed by its keeper. For now, it seems to be suggesting that you've integrated its essential teaching and are ready to live from that understanding without constant reminders. Thomas felt the truth of her words. So, what happens now? He asked, running his fingers over the green leather cover that had become so familiar. Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Now you live, Thomas. You continue tending your shop, connecting with your community, noticing the extraordinary within the ordinary. The book remains with you as a reminder, but the wisdom it contains has already taken root within you. She reached across and placed her hand briefly on his. You've become a guardian, not just of books, but of a particular quality of attention that's increasingly rare in our rushed world. Your shop is more than a business. It's a sanctuary where people can remember what truly matters, can reconnect with the rhythms that sustain us beneath the noise and distraction of modern life. Thomas considered this for a moment, feeling both the responsibility and the privilege of such a role. I never thought of it quite that way before, he said, softly. I was just selling books. You were never just selling books, Eleanor replied. Even before the Book of Rhyme came to you, you were creating a space where people could slow down, could remember the value of story and idea, could find temporary shelter from the constant demands for productivity and speed. The book simply helped you recognize the deeper purpose you were already serving. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the snow fall past the windows, each flake catching the lamplight briefly before continuing its gentle descent. The shop around them seemed to hold the quiet with a kind of reverence. The books on their shelves containing thousands of voices temporarily stilled, waiting for the right reader to bring them back to life. Finally, Eleanor rose. I should go. The snow is getting heavier. Thomas stood as well. Will I see you again? Her smile was warm but enigmatic. Of course. We're connected now through the book and its lineage of guardians. Our paths will cross when they need to. She adjusted her purple coat and moved toward the door. Keep your attention on the rhythm, Thomas. Everything else flows from that. With those words, she slipped out into the snowy night, leaving Thomas alone with Milton and the green book. He locked the door behind her and stood for a moment, watching the snow transform the familiar street into something magical and new, just as the Book of Rhyme had transformed his familiar life. That night, as Thomas prepared for bed, he placed the book on his nightstand as usual. Though its pages were now blank, it felt no less valuable, a physical reminder of the wisdom he had begun to embody, a symbol of his connection to a lineage of seekers who had discovered the extraordinary within the ordinary. As he settled beneath his covers, Thomas found that the quality of attention he had been cultivating continued to deepen. The weight of his body against the mattress, the rhythm of his breathing, the gradual release of the day's subtle tensions, all registered with remarkable clarity, transforming the simple act of preparing for sleep into a kind of natural meditation. Without opening the book of rhyme, Thomas recalled lines that had particularly touched him, about the wisdom of trees releasing their leaves in autumn, about finding infinity within a flower, about the sacred nature of transitions and thresholds. These words had become part of him now, woven into the fabric of his understanding, available not just as concepts, but as lived experience. As sleep approached, Thomas felt an unusual sense of completion mixed with beginning, one cycle coming to its natural conclusion, even as another was already starting to unfold. There was profound peace in this recognition, a deep trust in the rhythm that carried him and all things through their natural cycles of activity and rest, expansion and contraction, speaking and silence. His last conscious thought before drifting into sleep was simple gratitude for the mysterious green book that had come into his life at precisely the right moment, for Eleanor and her gentle guidance, for the ordinary miracle of his small bookshop and the life he had built there. These weren't extraordinary circumstances by conventional standards, yet he had discovered within them a richness and meaning that no external achievement could have provided. Thomas slept deeply that night, his dreams filled with gentle rhythms, waves breaking on distant shores, leaves dancing on autumn breezes, his own heart beating its steady cadence of life. Throughout all these dreams ran a thread of recognition that he was held within something larger than himself, supported by rhythms that had been playing since the beginning of time and would continue long after his brief but precious life had ended. When Thomas woke the next morning, something had shifted subtly but significantly. The heightened awareness that had initially seemed like a special state requiring effort had settled into a natural way of being, not something he needed to achieve or maintain, but simply his authentic relationship with life when unnecessary doing fell away. As he went about his morning routine, brewing tea, preparing breakfast, dressing for the day, Thomas found himself moving with a quiet grace that came not from trying to be mindful, but from allowing himself to be fully present with each simple activity. There was a flow to his movements, a natural rhythm that felt both deeply personal and somehow universal. When he opened the shop that day, Thomas carried with him not just the green book tucked under his arm, but the living wisdom it had helped him rediscover. That peace wasn't something to be sought in extraordinary experiences or achievements, but rather recognized as already present within the natural cadence of existence. Customers who entered Abernathy Books that snowy morning found not just a selection of carefully curated books, but a space that invited them to slow down, to remember the value of attention in a world increasingly defined by distraction. They found a bookseller who saw them not just as consumers, but as fellow travellers on a shared journey, each seeking in their own way to remember what truly matters beneath the surface noise of modern life. And as Thomas helped them find the books they sought, or sometimes the books they didn't know they were looking for, but somehow needed, he recognised that he was offering something beyond mere merchandise. He was creating tiny openings, brief moments where people might glimpse the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary, might remember the rhythm that connects all things, including their own precious lives. The Book of Rhyme remained articulations of understanding that might serve future guardians of the book, just as previous guardians' words had served him. The shop continued to evolve, becoming increasingly recognised as a sanctuary where people could remember and reconnect with deeper rhythms. The monthly literary events expanded into a community of seekers exploring the role of story and poetry in making sense of modern life. The children who came for Thomas's reading program grew up with an appreciation for the magic of books and the value of slowing down in a world that increasingly valued speed above all else. Through it all, Thomas remained the quiet centre, not a guru or teacher in any formal sense, but simply a person who had remembered how to live in harmony with natural rhythms, and who created a space where others might glimpse that possibility for themselves. His was not a dramatic transformation that would make headlines or attract followers, but rather the kind of subtle yet profound shift that ripples outward in ways impossible to measure, yet deeply significant in their effects. And on quiet evenings, after closing, Thomas would sometimes sit in his reading chair with Milton purring beside him, the green book open on his lap, though its pages remained blank. In those peaceful moments between day and night, he would feel again the truth that had changed everything while changing nothing at all, that the extraordinary isn't found by escaping the ordinary, but by bringing extraordinary attention to it, by recognising the miracle hidden in plain sight within each breath, each heartbeat, each moment fully lived. In this recognition, Thomas found the peace that had always been present beneath the surface of awareness, the natural state of being that emerges when we align with, rather than resist, the rhythm that connects all things. And in that peace, that alignment, that recognition, he discovered not an ending, but an ever-unfolding beginning, a continuous invitation to discover anew the quiet miracle of being alive. Thomas settled into his reading chair, the day's work complete, the shop now still and peaceful around him. Outside, snow continued to fall, transforming the familiar street into a wonderland of soft white shapes and muffled sounds. Inside, the warm glow of reading lamps created islands of golden light amid comfortable shadows. The book of rhyme rested on his lap, its green cover catching the lamplight. Though its pages remained blank, Thomas felt its presence as a comfort and a reminder of the journey he had undertaken. A journey not of geographic distance, but of deepening attention, of remembering what truly matters beneath the surface distractions of daily life. Milton appeared from wherever he had been exploring and jumped lightly onto Thomas's lap, turning in a circle before settling into a purring ball of contentment. Thomas stroked the cat's soft fur, noticing the perfect synchronization of his touch with Milton's purring, a small but perfect example of the rhythmic harmony that underlies all existence. As Thomas sat in this peaceful moment between day and night, he felt his body gradually releasing the subtle tensions accumulated during hours of standing, reaching, carrying. His breathing naturally slowed and deepened, each exhale carrying away a little more effort, each inhale bringing fresh energy and awareness. The weight of his body settled more completely into the chair, muscles softening, joints easing. His shoulders dropped away from his ears, his facial expressions released into neutral openness. His hands rested with palms open on the arms of the chair and the cat's warm body. There was no need to direct or control this process of relaxation. It happened naturally when he simply allowed it, when he stopped the unconscious holding pattern of subtle tension. The body knew how to release when given permission, just as it knew how to breathe, to digest, to heal. Thomas noticed how this physical softening was accompanied by a similar relaxation in his mind. Thoughts continued to arise, reflections on the day's events, plans for tomorrow, questions still awaiting answers, but they no longer carried the same sense of urgency or demand for immediate attention. Like clouds passing across the sky, they moved through awareness without requiring engagement or resolution. In this spacious state of being, Thomas became aware of the multitude of rhythms surrounding him. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, marking seconds with reassuring regularity. The distant hum of the heating system cycling on and off. The occasional car passing outside, its sound muffled by the falling snow. His own heartbeat steady and strong within his chest. His breathing rising and falling like gentle waves against a shore. These rhythms weren't separate or competing, but rather components of a greater harmony, like instruments in an orchestra playing a complex symphony. When he allowed himself to simply listen without analysing or categorising, Thomas could sense the underlying unity, the perfect coordination that required no conductor. As his awareness expanded further, Thomas began to feel his connection to rhythms beyond the immediate environment, the turning of the earth that created day and night, the orbit around the sun that generated seasons, the ancient cycle of water moving from ocean to cloud to rain to river and back again, the cosmic dance of galaxies spiraling through space. These larger patterns weren't abstract concepts, but living realities that influenced and supported his existence in every moment. His body was made of elements forged in ancient stars. His daily rhythms of waking and sleeping responded to the rotation of the planet. His very cells contained the memory of evolutionary rhythms stretching back to the beginning of life. In this recognition of interconnection, Thomas felt neither insignificant nor overwhelmed, but rather perfectly placed, a necessary note in the greater symphony, neither more nor less important than any other, each contributing its unique quality to the whole. The snow continued to fall outside, each flake a perfect and temporary expression of pattern and possibility. The books on their shelves contained thousands of human voices preserved through time, each offering a particular perspective on the shared mystery of existence. The cat on his lap embodied the wisdom of complete presence, fully surrendered to the moment without reservation or agenda. Thomas sat within this web of connection, this tapestry of rhythms, feeling himself both witness and participant. There was no need to achieve or become anything other than what he already was, a conscious element within the greater whole, capable of recognizing and appreciating the miracle of existence, even in its most ordinary expressions. As evening deepened into night, Thomas remained in this state of peaceful awareness, neither clinging to wakefulness nor seeking sleep, but simply allowing his natural rhythms to unfold. His breathing grew slower and deeper, his thoughts more occasional and dreamlike, his sense of separate self gradually softening at the edges. Milton had long since fallen asleep, his small body rising and falling with each breath, a picture of perfect trust and surrender. The snow outside had slowed to occasional flakes drifting past the windows, the street now transformed as an abrupt switch from one state to another, but as a gradual transition, a gentle dimming of external awareness, accompanied by an expansion of internal space. There was a rightness to this rhythm, a wisdom in the alternation of activity and rest that all living beings shared. His eyelids grew heavy, his breathing deepened further, and his thoughts became more fragmentary and dreamlike. Images began to replace concepts, the green book transforming into a forest path, the shop expanding into a vast library where all the books ever written could be found, his own body becoming lighter, less solid, more permeable to the currents of energy flowing around and through him. As Thomas drifted towards sleep, still seated in his reading chair, with Milton purring softly on his lap, he carried with him the recognition that had transformed his experience of life, that peace wasn't something to be achieved through effort, but rather his natural state when unnecessary doing fell away, revealing the quiet miracle of simply being. In this recognition, this remembering, Thomas found himself held within the perfect rhythm that had always been playing beneath the surface of awareness, the cadence that connected all things in a dance of becoming and dissolving, expressing and resting, speaking and listening. And as consciousness began its nightly journey into dream, Thomas surrendered completely to this rhythm, trusting it to carry him through the cycles of sleep, just as it carried him through the cycles of waking life, with perfect wisdom, perfect timing, perfect care. The snow fell silently. The books stood witness on their shelves. The cat dreamed cat dreams of hunting and comfort. And Thomas Abernathy, keeper of books and now guardian of rhythm, followed the ancient path into the mystery of sleep, certain that he would emerge renewed when the dance of time brought morning once again to his small corner of the world. As Thomas floated in the peaceful space between waking and sleeping, his body growing heavy in the reading chair, his mind drifting towards dreams, he felt himself held in a perfect balance, neither grasping for consciousness nor rushing toward sleep, but simply allowing the natural rhythm to carry him where it would. The weight of his body seemed to increase with each breath, creating a pleasant sensation of sinking, of being supported completely by the chair beneath him, by the floor beneath the chair, by the earth beneath the building. This chain of support extended indefinitely, reminding him that he had always been held, always been part of something larger than his individual existence. His breathing slowed to a deep, steady pace, the inhale bringing just enough energy to maintain this peaceful awareness, the exhale releasing a little more of the subtle effort that kept him separate and defined. With each breath cycle, Thomas felt himself softening, expanding, the boundaries between inner and outer growing more permeable. Thoughts continued to arise, but with decreasing frequency and substance, like clouds thinning as they pass across the sky, revealing glimpses of the vast blue space beyond. These fragmentary thoughts no longer demanded attention or resolution, but simply appeared and dissolved in their own time, their own rhythm. The sensations in Thomas's body transformed gradually from the specific, the pressure of the chair against his back, the weight of Milton on his lap, the temperature of the air against his skin, to more generalized awareness of heaviness, warmth, and comfort. These qualities weren't located in particular body parts, but seemed to permeate his entire being. As this transformation progressed, Thomas began to experience occasional hypnagogic imagery, brief, vivid scenes that appeared felt familiar. A forest path winding between ancient trees, whose branches moved in perfect synchronization with his breathing. These images came and went without attachment or interpretation, like reflections in water disturbed by a gentle breeze, present for a moment, then transformed into new patterns, each beautiful and complete in itself. Thomas watched them arise and pass with the same peaceful attention he now brought to all experience, neither clinging nor rejecting, simply witnessing their dance. The sounds around him, Milton's purring, the ticking clock, the occasional settling of the old building, began to take on a dreamlike quality, sometimes seeming closer, sometimes more distant, sometimes blending together into a single harmonious hum that vibrated at the edge of hearing. This auditory transformation mirrored the visual and sensory shifts, all part of the natural progression towards sleep. Time itself began to stretch and fold in unusual ways. A moment of awareness might seem to expand indefinitely, containing infinite detail and possibility, while entire sequences of thought and sensation might pass in what felt like an instant. This flexibility of temporal experience was not disorienting, but rather liberating, a reminder that time, as typically conceived, was itself a construction, a useful but limited way of organizing experience. Throughout this gradual dissolution of ordinary consciousness, Thomas maintained a thread of peaceful awareness, not the sharp focus of analytical thought, but the open, receptive attention that registers experience without naming or categorizing it. This quality of awareness didn't resist the movement towards sleep, but rather accompanied it, bearing witness to the transformation without attempting to control or direct it. As Thomas drifted deeper into this twilight state between waking and dreaming, he felt a profound sense of rightness, of participation in a process as ancient as life itself. The daily surrender to rest and renewal that all creatures share. There was wisdom in this rhythm, this alternation of activity and restoration, a wisdom his body knew perfectly even when his mind forgot. The weight of his body continued to increase, creating the pleasant sensation of sinking deeper into the chair, into heaviness, into rest. His muscles released their habitual tension, his joints softened, his facial expression eased into perfect neutrality. Even his breathing, already slow and deep, became almost imperceptible, just enough movement to sustain life, no more. In this state of profound relaxation, Thomas experienced what seemed like a gentle expansion, as if his awareness, no longer confined to the specific sensations and boundaries of his physical form, began to extend outward, becoming more diffuse, more inclusive. This wasn't a disconnection from the body, but rather a recognition that consciousness wasn't limited to or defined by physical form. The borders between self and environment, inside and outside, me and not me, distinctions that seemed so clear and necessary in ordinary waking consciousness, revealed themselves as useful but ultimately provisional constructs rather than fundamental realities. In this twilight awareness, Thomas sensed the underlying continuity, the unbroken field of being that contained and connected all apparently separate forms. As sleep approached more closely, even this recognition began to dissolve into something simpler, more fundamental, a pure being with, a restful presence that required no object or concept, no framework or understanding. This wasn't unconscious consciousness, but rather consciousness free from the structures and limitations of ordinary thought, experiencing itself directly without mediation. In this spacious awareness, Thomas felt completely at peace, not as an achievement or attainment, but as a recognition of what had always been present beneath the surface activity of seeking, doing, becoming. This peace wasn't dependent on circumstances or conditions, but rather revealed itself as the natural state when unnecessary effort fell away. The final transition into sleep happened not as a loss or ending, but as a gentle merging, a natural continuation of the process that had been unfolding all along. Awareness didn't switch off, but rather change form, moving from the structures and patterns of waking consciousness into the fluid, symbolic landscape of dreams. And as Thomas surrendered completely to this ancient rhythm, to this perfect wisdom that required no understanding or control, he carried with him the recognition that had transformed his experience of life, that peace wasn't something to be found outside himself or achieved through effort, but rather his natural state when he aligned with, rather than resisted, the rhythm that connected all things. In this recognition, this remembering, Thomas found himself held within the perfect orchestration of existence, supported, guided, and renewed by the same intelligence that orchestrated the dance of galaxies, the cycles of seasons, the opening and closing of flowers, the beating of his own heart. And so, Thomas Abernathy, keeper of books and guardian of rhythm, followed the path into sleep, not as a shutting down, but as a letting go, a trust in the wisdom that had carried him and all beings since the beginning of time, and would continue long after the brief but precious miracle of his individual life had returned to the greater whole from which it arose. The snow fell silently outside, covering the city in a blanket of quiet white. The books stood witness on their shelves, holding stories and ideas across time. Milton dreamed cat dreams of warmth and hunting, and Thomas floated in the peaceful current of sleep, held perfectly within the rhythm of existence that needed no name or explanation, only recognition and trust. As Thomas drifted deeper into sleep, his breathing grew even slower and deeper. Each inhale brought just enough life-giving air, and each exhale released a little more of any remaining tension. His heartbeat continued its steady rhythm, strong and reliable, pumping blood through his relaxed body. The weight of his limbs increased further, creating the pleasant sensation of being completely supported. There was no need to hold or adjust his position. Gravity embraced him fully, taking on the work of maintaining his form. His muscles released their final subtle holdings, surrendering completely to rest. With each breath, Thomas sank a little deeper into the perfect heaviness of sleep. His body knew exactly how to enter this restorative state, had been practicing this daily surrender since his first breath. There was ancient wisdom in this rhythm of activity and rest, a wisdom that resided not in the thinking mind, but in the intelligence of the body itself. In this deepening relaxation, Thomas no longer needed to track or direct his experience. The natural processes of sleep unfolded perfectly without supervision or control. His conscious mind gradually released its vigilance, allowing the deeper systems of restoration and renewal to take over. The peaceful weight in his limbs spread throughout his entire body. His arms and legs felt warm and heavy, pleasantly immobile. His torso softened, the rhythm of his breathing becoming almost imperceptible as the specific awareness of body sensations faded, a general sense of comfort and safety remained. Thomas floated in this comfort, held perfectly within it, neither seeking nor resisting, simply being. This was not unconsciousness, but a different quality of consciousness, receptive, restful, renewing. The external environment, the bookshop, the falling snow, the sleeping cat, gradually dissolved from awareness, replaced by the interior landscape of dreams. Images and sensations arose and transformed with fluid logic, the green book opening to reveal pages filled with light, forest paths winding between ancient trees, conversations with people both familiar and unknown, landscapes that could exist nowhere in waking reality, yet felt perfectly natural in the dream state. These dreams weren't random, but carried forward the themes and insights of waking life, processing and integrating them at levels beyond conscious thought. The wisdom about rhythm and presence that Thomas had been exploring continued to unfold in symbolic form, revealing dimensions that could not be accessed through ordinary thinking. Throughout this dreamscape ran the thread of peaceful recognition that all is well, that nothing needs to be fixed or solved, that the natural state of being is complete and perfect just as it is. This wasn't a thought or concept, but a direct knowing that permeated every aspect of the dream experience. Time in this dream state operated differently than in waking consciousness, expanding, contracting, folding back on itself. A single moment might contain what would seem like hours of experience in ordinary time, while entire sequences might pass in what felt like an instant. This flexibility revealed time itself as a construct rather than an absolute, a useful but limited way of organizing experience. As the night deepened, Thomas's dreams gradually shifted from the more active, narrative-driven sequences of early sleep to the quieter, more abstract patterns of deep rest. Images became simpler, more archetypal, water flowing, leaves falling, light changing. The symbolic processing of everyday experience gave way to deeper restoration at the cellular level. In this profound rest, Thomas's body engaged in its nightly work of renewal, repairing tissues, balancing hormones, consolidating memories, clearing waste products from cells. This physical restoration mirrored the mental and emotional integration happening at the level of dreams, all part of the perfect wisdom of the sleep cycle. Throughout these processes, a subtle thread of awareness remained, not the analytical, self-referential consciousness of waking life, but a simple, peaceful presence that witnessed without judgment or intervention. This witnessing didn't interfere with the depth of rest, but rather allowed it to unfold completely, held within a field of gentle attention. As the night progressed towards dawn, Thomas's dream state gradually began to lighten. The abstract patterns of deep sleep gave way once more to more recognizable imagery and scenarios. The body, having completed its essential restorative work, began preparing for the transition back to waking consciousness. This preparation was not abrupt, but gradual. Systems slowly reactivating, awareness gradually reconnecting with the physical form and environment. Even in this transitional state, the peaceful recognition remained that all phases of consciousness, from deepest sleep to full wakefulness, were part of a single continuous rhythm, each with its own purpose and wisdom. The first hints of morning light filtered since the arrival of the Green Book, that peace wasn't something to be achieved through effort, but rather his natural state when unnecessary. Doing fell away, revealing the quiet miracle of existence. The snow fell silently, gradually slowing as dawn approached. The books stood witness on their shelves, holding wisdom and story across time. And Thomas slept, the perfect sleep of one who has remembered what truly matters, the rhythm that connects all things, the peace that has always been present beneath the surface of awareness, waiting only to be recognized and trusted. As the first light of dawn strengthened, painting the eastern sky with delicate pinks and golds, Thomas began the gentle transition from sleep toward waking. This wasn't an abrupt shift, but a gradual reorienting. Systems slowly reactivating, awareness reconnecting with physical form and environment. The deep restfulness of sleep remained, even as consciousness began to return. There was no hurry in this transition, no rush to engage with the demands of the day. Just as falling asleep had been a process of letting go, waking was a process of gathering, reassembling the elements of self and world that would be needed for the day's activities. First came a subtle shift in breathing, slightly deeper, slightly more intentional, then a growing awareness of the body's position, still seated in the reading chair where sleep had arrived. The weight and warmth that had characterized deep sleep began to lighten, muscles regaining their potential for movement while maintaining their relaxed state. Sounds from the environment began to register once more. The soft padding of Milton's paws as he jumped from Thomas's lap to stretch and begin his morning explorations. The distant calls of early birds greeting the dawn. The occasional car passing on the snow-covered street outside. These sounds didn't disturb the peaceful state, but rather provided gentle anchors for awareness to attach to as it returned to the waking world. Next came a growing recognition of light through closed eyelids. The darkness of sleep gradually yielding to a warm reddish glow as sunlight found its way through windows and curtains. This perception of light signaled to ancient systems within the body that the night cycle was complete, triggering the release of hormones that would support the transition to daytime alertness. Still, Thomas lingered in this in-between state, neither fully asleep nor fully awake, appreciating its unique qualities. In this threshold, awareness, the insights and restfulness of sleep, remained accessible even as the capacities of waking consciousness began to return. It was a sacred space, this borderland between states, worth honouring and exploring rather than rushing through. Thoughts began to form once more, but differently than before sleep. Clearer, fresher, unburdened by yesterday's accumulated concerns. Problems that had seemed complex or troubling now revealed simpler solutions, or showed themselves to be less significant than they had appeared. This clarifying function was part of sleep's gift, a reset that allowed new perspectives to emerge as awareness continued to gather. Thomas felt profound gratitude for the perfect restoration of sleep, for the wisdom of the body that knew exactly how to release into rest and how to return to activity. This alternation wasn't an interruption to life, but an essential rhythm within it, each phase necessary and valuable. The lessons of the Book of Rhyme remained present even in this transitional state. The recognition that peace wasn't something to be achieved through effort, but rather the natural condition when unnecessary doing fell away. The understanding that rhythm wasn't just a concept, but the very foundation of existence. The realization that the extraordinary didn't need to be sought outside understandings that informed every aspect of experience. Thomas carried them, not as beliefs requiring defense or proof, but as recognitions that had transformed his relationship with life itself. Gradually, as the morning light strengthened, Thomas allowed his eyes to open, greeting the new day with peaceful awareness. The bookshop around him was transformed by the morning sunlight and the blanket of snow outside. Every familiar object and surface appearing fresh and new, as if seen for the first time. This was another gift of rhythm, the constant renewal of perception, the opportunity to see the familiar world with fresh eyes after the restorative cycle of sleep. The same books on the same shelves, the same furniture in the same positions, yet all somehow made new by the quality of attention Thomas now brought to them. As he slowly straightened in his chair, feeling his muscles reawaken after hours of relaxed stillness, Thomas carried with him the peaceful continuity that bridged sleeping and waking consciousness. There was no sharp break between states, but rather a flowing movement, like the natural transition from ebb to flow in the ocean's tide. The day ahead would bring its activities and interactions, its challenges and opportunities. Yet Thomas knew he would meet them differently now, not from a place of separation and effort, but from alignment with the rhythm that connected all things. The peace that had always been present beneath the surface of awareness. Rising from his chair, Thomas stretched gently, feeling the pleasant awakening of muscles and joints after their night of release. Milton appeared from beneath a nearby shelf, stretching similarly in perfect feline synchronization. Outside, the snow-covered street was beginning to show signs of the neighborhood awakening, footprints marking fresh paths, windows lighting up as others began their day. As Thomas prepared to climb the stairs to his apartment to refresh himself before opening the shop, he paused to pick up the green book from where it had fallen to the side of his chair during sleep. Its leather cover caught the morning light, the deep green reminiscent of forest depths touched by sunlight. Though its pages remained blank, the book had fulfilled its purpose, not as a permanent guide, but as a temporary reminder of what Thomas had always known at some level, but had forgotten in the distractions of modern life. The wisdom it contained hadn't been external to him, but rather a reflection of his own deeper knowing, a knowing shared by all beings, but often overlooked in the rush and noise of contemporary existence. Holding the book with appreciation, Thomas began his ascent to the apartment, each step feeling like part of a greater rhythm, a perfect unfolding that required no effort or control, only recognition and trust. The day ahead, with all its ordinary activities and interactions, awaited not as a burden to be shouldered, but as an opportunity to continue discovering the extraordinary within the ordinary, the sacred within the seemingly mundane. And as the morning light filled the bookshop with golden warmth, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny galaxies, Thomas Abernathy, keeper of books, guardian of rhythm, ordinary man who had remembered something essential about being human, continued his journey into the day, carrying with him the peaceful recognition that would transform everything while changing nothing at all, that the rhythm of life was always playing for those quiet enough to listen, and within that rhythm, peace was never elsewhere but always here, always now, always available in the breathtaking simplicity of this moment, fully met with attention and love. Thank you for joining us for tonight's sleep story. Remember that the peace and rhythm you've experienced experience through Thomas's journey remain available to you in every moment of your life, not through extraordinary effort, but through the simple yet profound act of bringing your full attention to ordinary experience. As you rest now, allow your body to be fully supported by your bed. Feel the weight of your limbs growing heavier with each breath. Notice how your breathing naturally finds its own perfect rhythm when you simply allow it to flow without control or direction. The wisdom of your body knows exactly how to transition into sleep. You don't need to make it happen, only to create the conditions that allow sleep to emerge naturally, like a flower opening in its own perfect time. Release any remaining thoughts about tomorrow, about what needs to be done or figured out. All of that can wait until morning, when you'll approach it with the clarity and energy that come from deep rest. For now, simply be here, sinking deeper into comfort with each breath, letting go of effort, surrendering to the ancient rhythm of sleep that has carried you safely through every night of your life. Rest now, sleep deeply. Trust the wisdom of your body and the natural cycles that have sustained all living beings since the beginning of time. Peace is your natural state when unnecessary doing falls away, revealing the quiet miracle of simple